Across the world, there are forests that people refuse to enter after dark. Some are tied to old legends, others to real disappearances or strange sounds that no one can explain. These are places where stories and reality blur, where nature feels alive in ways we don't understand. This journey takes us through 21 forests said to be cursed, each holding its own silence, its own warnings, and its own reason to stay away when the sun goes down. Hoya Baciu Forest, Romania. You've heard the warnings before. Locals say that once the sun goes down, this forest is not a place for people. Just west of the Romanian city of Cluj-Napoca lies a stretch of woodland that seems ordinary by daylight, until you learn its history. This is Hoya Baciu Forest, a place so entangled in mystery that many Romanians call it the Bridgewater Triangle of Transylvania. The forest spreads across the hills overlooking Cluj. To most, it's a beautiful patch of nature, winding trails, thick oaken beach, and views of the city far below. But to those who live nearby, it's a place where strange things happen, and always have. The earliest story passed down here speaks of a shepherd named Baciu. One day he entered the forest with his flock, over 200 sheep, and never returned. Search parties found no trace of him or the animals. The name of the forest kept his memory, and with it a quiet warning. For decades, locals avoided its depths after dark. Hunters spoke of lights moving between the trees, and farmers claimed their animals became restless when the wind carried scents from the woods. To them, it was a place best left alone. But in the 1960s, the mystery of Hoya Baciu caught the world's attention. On a summer afternoon in 1968, a military technician named Emil Barnea went hiking with friends. As they entered a treeless clearing in the middle of the forest, they noticed a bright metallic object floating silently above the field. Barnea raised his camera and captured several photographs before it sped away. When the pictures were published, they were hailed as some of the clearest UFO images ever taken in Eastern Europe. Barnea lost his job soon after for releasing the photos without permission, but the forest gained international fame. From then on, people began calling it haunted. Since that day, reports have poured in from visitors who claim the forest behaves differently from any other. They describe bright orbs of light that drift through the air, sudden cold winds, disembodied laughter, and moments of nausea or dizziness that vanish the instant they step outside the tree line. Some say they've seen faces in the mist or heard footsteps when no one was there. Others insist their electronics drained instantly, compasses spun without reason, and photos developed with distortions that weren't visible at the time. At the centre of all these stories is a clearing, a perfect circle where trees refuse to grow. Surrounded on every side by dense vegetation, the soil inside remains nearly bare, grass thin and patchy, no saplings surviving for long. Visitors call it the clearing. Some believe it marks a landing site for something that came from above. Others whisper it's a portal, or a place where reality bends. When you stand in it, the forest around feels distant, as if muffled by invisible walls. Scientists from the local university tried to study it. A biologist named Alexandru Sift spent years photographing lights and shadows within the forest. Later, a chemist named Adrian Patrut analysed radiation and magnetic readings there. Their results were intriguing but inconclusive. Nothing clearly supernatural, yet nothing entirely ordinary either. Theories multiplied. Perhaps mineral deposits beneath the soil distorted instruments. Maybe unusual air currents or high humidity affected magnetic fields. Or perhaps the explanation was far simpler: human expectation. Psychologists have long known that fear changes perception. When someone enters a place they believe is cursed, every sound becomes sharper, every flicker of light more suspicious. In a forest like Hoya Baciu, where trunks twist at odd angles and fog clings to the ground, the mind fills in the gaps. The eye catches movement, the brain completes the shape, and suddenly a shadow becomes a figure. If the visitor already expects ghosts, that's what they'll see. Still, there are physical details that feed those beliefs. The trees here really do grow in strange patterns. Many bend from their base in spirals, curling toward the sky before straightening again. Botanists think it might come from wind exposure, soil instability, or fungi affecting growth hormones. To others, they look as if they were twisted by invisible hands. There's also the odd silence. Deep in the forest, the air grows heavy, sound seems dampened, and animal calls fade. Even the crunch of footsteps feels distant, swallowed by the canopy. Some say that silence is the most unsettling thing of all. At night, temperature changes quickly. Mist rises from the valleys and glides through the trees. With only moonlight to see by, that fog can appear as glowing shapes. Photographers who have tried to capture the lights often discover small insects or dust reflecting the flash. Yet the effect on film looks like luminous spheres. Many of the so-called orbs appear this way, ordinary particles caught by bright light in humid air. But when you're there, standing in near darkness, those orbs don't feel ordinary. They move, they shimmer, they seem alive. Some visitors tell of losing their sense of direction inside Hoya Baciu. Paths twist, landmarks vanish, and what was familiar an hour ago feels changed. It's easy to walk in circles here. The trees grow close, the terrain shifts subtly, and without sunlight it's hard to tell which way you came. When fatigue sets in, confusion follows, and confusion quickly turns into fear. People describe the forest pressing in on them, as if alive. When they finally step out into open fields, relief feels like waking from a dream. There's one account often repeated among guides. A woman entered the forest with friends one afternoon. She remembered only walking into the clearing. When she came out, she thought minutes had passed. Her companions said she'd been missing for hours. In her hand was an old coin covered in dirt that didn't belong to any modern currency. Whether true or not, that story reinforces what many here already believe, that time itself behaves differently inside. By day, the forest is bright and green. Families picnic along the trails, cyclists ride the ridges, and children chase each other through the grass. But locals still tell newcomers the same thing. When night falls, don't go wandering. There's no official rule, no gate or guard, only a shared feeling that the forest does not welcome visitors after dark. Farmers who live nearby sometimes say they hear singing drifting out from the trees, soft, distant, and without words. Others speak of shapes moving between trunks, never quite human, never quite animal. For scientists, Hoya Baciu is a case study in how environment and expectation shape experience. For believers, it's a gateway to the unknown. Whatever side you stand on, one thing is certain. This small patch of Transylvania holds an atmosphere unlike anywhere else. Step into its clearing as the last light fades, and you understand why so many refuse to. Daring Wood, Screaming Woods, Pluckley, England. In the southeast of England, past quiet fields and hedgerows, there's a woodland that looks ordinary from the outside. Oaks, beeches, and the faint smell of damp leaves. Yet when night falls, few locals choose to walk its paths. They call it Daring Wood, but almost everyone knows it by another name, the Screaming Woods of Pluckley. It's said that after sunset, the air fills with the cries of those who never left. Pluckley is a small village in Kent, surrounded by farmland and winding lanes. It has been called the most haunted village in England, a title given decades ago and still hard to shake. Daring Wood borders the village, stretching out like a shadow on its edge. People who live here grow up hearing the same advice. Don't wander there after dark. They say the screams begin when the mist starts to rise. The stories of Pluckley's ghosts are as old as the cottages that line its streets. Some of them are tied directly to the woods. One of the oldest tales tells of a highwayman named Robert Dubois. In the 18th century, he was caught by villagers and cornered at a place still known as Fright Corner. According to the legend, he hid inside a hollow oak, hoping to escape, but they ran him through with swords. His spirit, it said, still roams the forest, moving between the trees near where he died. Some walkers claim to see a dim light hovering among the branches, or a figure that vanishes when approached. Another legend tells of a colonel who hanged himself in the forest after the death of his lover. His ghost, they say, sways from a high branch at the edge of the wood. The sound of rope creaking in the wind is said to be a bad omen, a sign someone nearby will die before dawn. There's also the tale of a screaming man, thought to be a soldier who perished centuries ago. Locals describe the noise as human, yet not quite. It comes in bursts, then silence, then again, until it fades into the distance. Over the years, these stories have woven together into something more than folklore. Visitors who step into Daring Wood at dusk often report feeling watched. Some have heard footsteps behind them that stop the moment they turn. Others describe whispers that drift through the trees. It isn't just ghost hunters or thrill seekers who talk about it. Farmers, hikers, and even police officers have shared accounts of voices carried by the wind or sudden cold patches that seem to follow them. One of the most repeated stories comes from a man walking his dog along the footpath one winter evening. He heard a high-pitched scream so sharp that the dog yelped and bolted. When he reached the spot where the sound had come from, he found nothing. No people, no animals, no sign of distress. A few days later, he returned in daylight and said the place felt perfectly normal. Another visitor described hearing a woman calling for help, though her words were impossible to make out. He followed the voice deeper into the forest until it stopped abruptly, as if cut off. When he retraced his steps, he realized he had wandered far from the trail. To outsiders, it might seem like superstition. But locals will tell you there's something unusual about the sound of that forest. When the wind moves through the trees, it doesn't whistle, it wails. The branches creak and groan like something alive. In heavy fog, echoes bounce between trunks, making it impossible to tell where noises come from. Some researchers suggest that the forest's shape and density amplify and distort sound. A single scream or shout could carry for hundreds of meters, twisting along the slopes. Still, the stories persist because people swear what they heard was not the wind. The village of Pluckley itself adds to the atmosphere. Old houses lean over narrow lanes, and even on clear days the air feels heavy with memory. The local churchyard is said to be haunted by a red lady, and the pub nearby claims its own resident ghost. Every story overlaps the next until the entire area seems to live under one long haunting. For the people who grew up here, the legends aren't entertainment, they're part of the landscape. Folklorists trace many of these tales back to the 19th century, when villagers began passing down accounts of strange deaths and restless spirits. During that time, rural England was full of ghost lore tied to isolation and tragedy. Daringwood's reputation grew because it fit the pattern perfectly. Ancient trees, unexplained sounds, and a nearby village full of uneasy witnesses. In the 20th century, writers and journalists began calling Pluckley the most haunted village in Britain, counting up more than a dozen distinct ghosts. The woods became one of its most enduring mysteries. Skeptics have tried to find explanations. Some point to foxes, whose mating calls can sound startlingly human. Others mention owls or deer that cry out when startled. The layout of the forest can also confuse visitors. Its footpaths cross and loop, and dense fog can erase familiar landmarks within minutes. Lost and frightened, people often panic and interpret natural noises as supernatural. Yet even those who understand these explanations admit that Daringwood has an atmosphere that's hard to explain away. Many who have visited describe a particular point in the forest where the air feels heavier, as if charged. Electronic devices sometimes flicker or lose battery life, though that could be the cold affecting them. There are no verified records of violence or mass death here, no buried secrets in the soil, just centuries of stories layered like fallen leaves. But somehow, that's enough. When the sun sets behind the trees, the imagination takes over. On clear nights, the woods are said to glow faintly where the path opens to the fields. Drivers passing by have claimed to see figures standing just inside the tree line, staring out toward the road. When headlights hit them, they disappear. Others describe hearing laughter in the distance, like children playing, even though the village is far behind them. There are stories of hikers who entered the forest and came out hours later with no memory of where they'd been. Local guides sometimes lead ghost walks through Pluckley. They'll bring groups to the edge of the screaming woods but rarely venture far inside. Visitors gather with flashlights waiting for a sound. Some hear nothing but the rustle of leaves. Others claim faint cries travel through the darkness, short bursts that seem to come from every direction at once. A few have recorded audio they swear contains human voices, though analysis usually points to wind or distant animals. In daylight, Daringwood is peaceful. Families walk the trails, collecting chestnuts, and the village feels far away from its haunted reputation. But even then, there's something about the stillness. The trees grow close together, and sunlight filters through like smoke. Every so often, a sudden gust moves through, bending branches in a way that sounds almost like a sigh. For centuries, the people of Pluckley have lived beside these trees. They farm the land, raise families, and repeat the same quiet warning. After sunset, don't go near the woods. Maybe the screams are just the wind, or animals, or echoes caught between hills, but maybe that doesn't matter. The fear remains, passed down through generations, whispered in pubs and classrooms and homes. When darkness falls on Daring Wood, even those who laugh at the old tales tend to close their doors and listen. Dowhill Forest, Kurseong, India. The fog arrives early in Kurseong. It rolls in from the slopes of the eastern Himalayas and settles among the tall pines of Dowhill Forest, wrapping the trees in white silence. By day, this part of West Bengal looks peaceful. Tea gardens spread down the valleys, the air smells of rain and moss, and school children in uniforms walk home along the winding hill roads. But when evening comes, the light drains fast, and those same roads turn into something different. Locals warn travellers to leave before dark. They say that once the forest takes over, strange things begin to move among the trees. Dowhill sits on the outskirts of Kurseong, about an hour's drive from Darjeeling. The forest is thick, steep, and easy to lose yourself in if you step off the path. At its centre stands Victoria Boys' School, a colonial-era building built in the 1870s, back when the British used this area as a hill station. The school has been in use for more than a century, but when the term ends and the students leave, the silence of the empty halls seems to stretch into the woods. People who work there after hours speak of footsteps echoing through the corridors when no one else is inside, of whispers near the classrooms, of lights flickering even when the power is steady. The night guards often refuse to patrol alone. The road leading from the forest office down to the main town has a different name among locals. They call it the Death Road. It winds through the trees with sharp turns and no streetlights, and the fog can be so thick you can barely see your own headlights. Drivers say that when they pass through late at night, they sometimes see a figure standing at the edge of the road, a child, small and motionless. Others say they see a young boy walking along the path without a head. By the time they stop the car or turn to look again, the figure has vanished into the mist. The story of the headless boy is the most repeated legend in Kurseong. Woodcutters who work in the forest tell how they once saw a small figure step onto the trail and then fade away among the trees. Some believe he was a schoolboy who died in an accident decades ago. Others say he was murdered nearby, and his spirit never found peace. Whatever the origin, every version ends the same way. If you see him once, you never forget it. His body moves as though guided by habit, retracing a path he walked long ago while his missing head drips silence. Locals avoid talking about it too openly. They say it's bad luck to speak of the forest after sundown. The older generation warns that the woods feed on fear. Some claim that screams have been heard near the bend in the road, a sound halfway between a child's cry and the shriek of an animal. Others say they've felt someone following them through the fog, footsteps matching their own pace until they run. Those who grew up nearby often describe a deep unease that starts at the edge of the forest and grows heavier the farther you walk in. It's not just darkness, it's something deeper, as though the place itself resists visitors. Scientists who have studied the area offer simpler explanations. The forest is dense, and the mist scatters sound in strange ways. A shout can echo and seem to come from somewhere else entirely. Owls and mountain cats make high-pitched calls that can sound uncannily human in the right conditions. Even the headless boy, they say, might come from tricks of light, a human shape blurred by fog, or a person carrying something that changes their outline. But explanations don't erase stories. The more people try to rationalise the forest, the more others insist that something beyond logic is at work there. Some locals point to the history of the place. During the colonial period, this part of India saw its share of violence and hardship. Workers in the tea gardens lived under harsh conditions, and the mountain roads claimed many lives from landslides and accidents. Old records mention unmarked graves in the hills, and people believe restless spirits linger where they died. The combination of dense forest, mist and tragedy gave rise to the belief that Dowhill is cursed. Even the school's long stone corridors seem to carry echoes of that past. Wooden floors that creak, doors that open slightly on their own, and sudden drafts of cold air moving through rooms that should be still. Every year, curious travellers visit Kurseong to see the so-called haunted forest for themselves. They take photos at the entrance and walk a few metres down the trail before turning back. Guides from nearby tea estates often refuse to accompany them after sunset. They tell visitors that those who ignore the warnings sometimes lose their way. There are stories of hikers who entered before dusk and wandered for hours without finding the road again, even though the forest covers only a few kilometres. When they finally emerged, they swore the paths had changed. Some returned home ill, claiming they'd been followed by a presence they couldn't shake off. On clear days, the view from the top of Dow Hill is breathtaking. You can see the clouds drifting below and hear the distant hum of the town. But the beauty feels temporary, like a mask the mountain wears only for the day. As soon as the light fades, the temperature drops sharply. Mist pours back into the valleys, climbing between the trees. The road disappears in seconds. Locals who drive through late at night describe headlights catching something pale and still among the branches, sometimes a shape, sometimes a face, sometimes nothing they can name. For those who study folklore, Dow Hill is a perfect example of how stories evolve from place. The forest is real, the road is real, the eerie silence is real, the tales fill the spaces that nature leaves empty. Yet even skeptics admit there's a mood here that's hard to explain. The forest doesn't just look dark, it feels dark. Step a few feet inside and the world goes quiet, the sound of insects and birds vanishing as though muted. The trees rise straight and tall, their tops hidden in mist. Every direction looks the same. It's easy to see how someone might imagine a figure standing among them. The residents of Kurseong have learned to live beside the forest's reputation. Children grow up hearing the same warnings from parents and grandparents. Drivers slow down as they approach the bends of the death road, glancing at the tree line out of habit. Some say they've never seen anything themselves, but still feel uneasy passing that way. Others swear they've heard the faint sound of footsteps on nights when the fog is thickest. Whether those are ghosts, echoes, or tricks of the wind, no one can say for certain. When morning returns, the forest looks calm again. Sunlight filters through the pines, and the road hums with the sound of buses and motorbikes heading toward Darjeeling. Workers walk the trails with axes and baskets, children return to class, and the legends fade into the background. But for anyone who has stood there in the half-light, listening to the forest breathe, Dow Hill never feels entirely asleep. It waits, quiet and patient, for the next person who decides to test the road after dark. Freetown Fall River State Forest, Bridgewater Triangle, Massachusetts, USA. The forest begins quietly enough. Tall pines line the road, the wind moves softly through their needles, and sunlight flickers across the ground like waves. But if you drive just a few miles into the Freetown Fall River State Forest in Massachusetts, something changes. The air grows heavy, the trees crowd closer, and the stillness deepens until it feels unnatural. This is the heart of what locals call the Bridgewater Triangle, an area known not for its beauty but for its strange and often violent history. The forest covers more than 5,000 acres, stretching across the towns of Freetown, Fall River, and Lakeville. It's easy to get lost here. Trails twist without clear direction, and the trees are so thick that daylight fades faster than you expect. The land is public, managed by the state, but few venture deep inside after dusk. Those who live nearby speak of odd lights, sudden chills, and noises that echo through the dark. For them, this isn't just a park, it's a place where something lingers. Long before the forest became public land, it belonged to the Wampanoag people. To them, these woods were sacred. They told stories of spirits who guarded the rivers and of a powerful presence that lived in the swamps. The nearby Hockomock Swamp, whose name means place where spirits dwell, was part of that same landscape. When colonists arrived in the 1600s, they cleared parts of the forest and forced the Wampanoag from their land. Generations later, many still believe the area carries the weight of that history. Some say the anger of the displaced spirits remains here, echoing through the forest's silence. Over time, human tragedies added new layers to that weight. In the 1970s, police discovered the remains of a teenage girl tied to a tree deep inside the woods. The case was real and unsolved for years. A decade later, other violent crimes occurred within the forest boundaries: murders, assaults, and bodies found near abandoned trails. Reports of strange rituals began surfacing at the same time. Police officers spoke of altars made from stones, burned animal remains, and signs of gatherings that took place at night. Investigations were launched into rumours of cults using the forest for sacrifices. Nothing was ever proven, but the stories spread fast. By the 1980s, the Bridgewater Triangle had entered New England folklore. The term came from researchers who noticed that dozens of reports, ghosts, lights, animal mutilations, even UFO sightings, were all coming from the same region. Freetown Fall River State Forest sat right in the centre of it. For locals, it wasn't a theory or a mystery show. It was a real place they knew too well. Parents warned their children to stay out after sunset. Hunters stopped setting traps there. Some claimed the forest had moods, some days peaceful, others angry. Visitors who dared to explore the forest at night often came back uneasy. Hikers described hearing footsteps that followed them off trail, only to stop when they turned around. Campers woke to find strange symbols carved into nearby trees. A few said they'd seen lights moving between the trunks, small and white, like lanterns that vanished the moment they looked directly at them. Others claimed the forest seemed to hum, a faint vibration that grew stronger the deeper they went in. Many brushed it off as imagination, but others insisted it was something else. Near the forest centre stands a rock formation known as Profile Rock, named because its shape resembles a human face. The Wampanoag once believed it depicted one of their chiefs watching over the land. Visitors today say that when clouds pass across the stone, the face seems to shift expressions. Some claim to have seen figures standing on top of it at night, even though the trail is closed after dark. In 2019, part of the formation collapsed, but the stories continued. Locals still leave offerings there, flowers, tobacco, coins, hoping to keep the spirits at peace. Another spot, called the Ledge, is a cliff overlooking a quarry where several deaths have occurred. Some were accidents, others suicides. People who stand near the edge say they feel drawn forward by a strange pull, as if something below calls to them. Fishermen at the quarry report hearing voices echoing from the water, and park rangers warn visitors not to go near the edge alone. Not all the fear here is supernatural. The forest has a long record of real danger. Fires have swept through its pine groves. Illegal dumping and vandalism are common. In 2001, 2 men were found shot to death near Bell Rock Road, a case that shocked the nearby towns and remains linked to the area's dark reputation. Police patrols increased for a while, but when they stopped, the stories returned. The combination of tragedy, legend and isolation makes Freetown Fall River State Forest a place of invisible borders. On maps, the boundaries are simple: state land, hiking trails, picnic areas. But to those who live here, the true line is drawn by fear. Once the light begins to fade and the forest turns black, that line becomes clear. Hikers step back toward the parking lot. Drivers roll up their windows and keep their eyes on the road. Even seasoned locals admit they avoid certain trails at night. Researchers who study folklore say that stories like these often grow around places marked by trauma. The crimes, the disappearances, and the ancient burial grounds all leave traces in memory. Over time, those memories mix with imagination, and the forest becomes something larger than itself. A mirror of everything people fear but can't explain. Yet there's also something physical about the unease here. The stillness feels different, the silence too deep. It isn't the usual quiet of nature. It feels watched. People who have camped in the forest describe the moment they realised they weren't alone. One man recalled hearing twigs snap just beyond the firelight, rhythmic, like footsteps pacing in a circle. When he shouted, the noise stopped. Another camper woke to find her tent door open, though she was sure she'd zipped it shut. Her flashlight flickered and went out. When morning came, the batteries were drained completely. Even park rangers, the ones who know every road and trail, have their own uneasy moments. Some speak of hearing faint chanting from the deeper woods, impossible to trace. Others talk about sudden temperature drops in specific spots. One moment warm, the next so cold their breath turned white. Officially, they blame wind tunnels, acoustics, and temperature inversions. Unofficially, they admit there's something strange here. If you stand on the forest road at dusk, you might see nothing out of the ordinary. Cars pass, the trees sway, and the first stars appear. But if you stay long enough, you'll notice the world around you falling silent. No birds, no crickets, just the weight of the forest pressing in. It's then that you understand why so many people turn back. The forest doesn't threaten you, it waits. You can feel it in the air, in the space between the trees, in the way sound disappears as if swallowed. And when you finally step outside the tree line and into the safety of streetlights, you realise the unease doesn't leave right away. It clings to you, like the scent of pine and the memory of something that almost called your name. Pine Barrens, New Jersey, USA. You can feel it the moment the pine needles underfoot begin to soften and the light falls lower. Here, in southern New Jersey, spreads a vast forest known simply as the Pine Barrens. Over 1 million acres of sandy soil, dense pitch pine, swamps and scrub, old roads and darker tales. By day it seems quiet enough, but by night or on a windless afternoon, the stillness takes on meaning. Tonight we enter its shadowy roads and marsh edges to explore its stories first. Stories of a creature, of fear, of isolation, and then the map of the land itself, the terrain that made those stories possible. First we look at the folklore. Deep in the Barrens lies the legend of the Jersey Devil, a creature of wings and claw and screaming presence, said to have haunted this land for more than 2 centuries. The most widely told version begins with a woman named Mrs. Leeds in the year 1735 in a settlement of the region. Overwhelmed, the tale says she gave birth to a 13th child and, in frustration, cried out, "Let this one be the devil." The child, when born, transformed into a monstrous figure. Wings spread, hooves planted, a forked tail and a screech that echoed across the woods. The creature took flight into the midnight pine and vanished. The story spread. Over time, sightings increased. Strange footprints by moonlight, panicked dogs at the edge of woods, cattle found dead with no visible cause. The Jersey Devil became part cautionary tale, part community memory. It is said that in January 1909 the creature caused regional panic. Trolleys were reported attacked. Milkmen claimed strange shapes flew across their wagons. Newspapers carried headlines of children staying home. Though many of these reports were never substantiated, they fed the legend. Some historians trace the origin deeper still, back to the Leeds family crest, colonial religious disputes, and distrust of the remote families living in the Barrens, known locally as Pineys. Over generations, the landscape and the legend merged. The forest became not simply trees, but a setting for something wild, something beyond easy explanation. Other legends swirl here too. Ghostly pirates said to roam the cranberry bogs, ghosts of runaway slaves hidden in the dense scrub, phantom lights over still water known as the Blue Hole. The landscape of the Pine Barrens invited myth because it resisted easy settlement. Sandy soils were poor for farming, the land was scrubby and wild, and many roads remained unpaved, used by moonshiners, poachers or smugglers. The outlying communities came to view the forest as liminal, a borderland between civilization and wilderness, where the rules seem different and the darkness deeper. The legend of the Jersey Devil sits at the intersection of folklore and land. Now we turn our compass to the map room portion. The Pine Barrens span 7 counties in New Jersey, stretching across Atlantic, Burlington, Camden, Cape May, Cumberland, Gloucester, and Ocean. The terrain is low-lying but expansive. The forests are interrupted by cranberry bogs, cedar swamps, old iron ore pits, quiet sand roads, and a network of fire trails and old logging tracks. Some roads are paved and passable, others become narrow sand lanes lined by leaning pines, whose tops disappear into dusk. One road in particular, Mullica River floodplain access roads, runs alongside ancient cranberry bogs, and by moonlight is said to feel endless. Locals attempting to drive through after dark caution to stay on the main routes. Within the map lie names like Double Trouble, Suey Place, Marianne Furnace, each a reminder of a past industry or settlement that did not quite tame the land. Travel through the Barrens in the 18th and 19th centuries was slow. The terrain resisted farming, many families were poor, and outlaws found hiding places among the pines. The roadways often lacked signage. Shift between sand and pavement, and the southeast Pine Barrens remains remote even today. The isolation did more than discourage outsiders, it encouraged stories. If you visit at dusk, you'll note that the forests grow narrower. The tree growth becomes thicker, the underbrush denser, and light fades quickly. A driver on a sand road might flick on headlights only to see silhouettes moving just beyond the beam. Hikers often find that trails converge with unmarked paths. The topography is modest, no high peaks, but the monotony and uniformity of terrain mean disorientation happens easily. That's part of the risk. That's part of the reason the legends hold weight. From the air, the Barrens look like a checkerboard of wilderness and human intrusion. There are cranberry bogs with their irrigation ditches, power line cuttings slicing through tree line, and old industrial sites reclaimed by nature. Yet even these intrusions cannot change the character of the place. It retains a wild edge. And locals often say that certain back roads become treacherous not because of condition, but because of expectation of the unknown. The The forest boundary is not simply land versus settlement, it becomes fear versus safety. Even today, hikers and hunters entering the deeper parts of the Barrens after dusk say they feel differently, not just uneasy, but erased. The sound of their own footsteps softens, the forest floor becomes uniform. Without landmarks, direction loses meaning. More than one story tells of someone entering at dusk, driving slowly along a fire trail, only to find when they turned around that the road behind looked unfamiliar. Trees shifted, sand turned to pavement. They turned on their phone GPS only to find no signal. In that moment, the map ceases to help. The legend of the Jersey Devil and the terrain of the Pine Barrens are not separate. They feed each other. The dark forest provides the canvas. The legend gives the image. Locals avoid deep roads at night not just because they are unlit and remote, but because they sit within the geography of the myth. Some roads have names like Devil's Trail, Black Swamp, Ghost Town Road. These names draw attention to the edge of things familiar. The road ends, the forest begins, the legend takes root. You might follow a main route like Route 542 or Route 563 by daylight and feel safe, but drive the sand trails off those roads when the light goes thin and you enter the zone that once held bog iron forge sites, charcoal pits and moonshine stills hidden in the scrub. Each of those past uses left its own mark. Foundations, cast iron remains, rusty barrels, old tools. The human imprint contrasts with nature's reclamation. Here was a land where men tried to build and nature pushed back. The legend of the Jersey Devil captures that tension. For those living in towns around the Barrens, the forest carries warnings. Fathers tell their children not to wander into the pines after dark. Hunters bring extra lights, and some night-driving tourists report birds flying into their windshield at the last second, or headlights catching something just beyond range. Whether or not the Jersey Devil is real, the atmosphere is. That is the point. And so, on a windless summer night, the Pine Barrens become more than a forest. They become a story. They become the legend. Each scrubby path, each stretch of dark road, each shuttered cranberry bog merges into a landscape where a scream might travel unseen, or a winged shape might flicker across the sand. The map lines fade, the road ends, the myth begins, and the forest holds its breath as you pass. Aokigahara, Sea of Trees, Japan. The forest is nearly silent. Under the shadow of Mount Fuji on its northwestern flank lies Aokigahara, also called Jukai or the Sea of Trees. From the moment you step past the trailhead, you feel the change. The path narrows, the roots twist, the light diminishes, and the hush is so deep you realize you hear nothing. It's a border you cross, from normal world into something altered. First, the borderline. The forest extends over about 30 square kilometers of hardened lava rock, formed during the large eruption of Mount Fuji in 864 CE. That lava field created a terrain unlike the surrounding slopes. Dark rock, porous, covered in moss and gnarled tree growth. The rocky ground absorbs sound. Birds are fewer. The wind moves through differently. Hikers speak of the sudden shift. One minute you're on a comfortable trail, next you're in an echoless place where your own footsteps are loud. As you enter, signs appear. Your life is a precious gift, and messages urging those struggling to seek help. They mark the threshold between the daytime visit and something more. Over the years, authorities have placed cameras, patrol volunteers and rope lines to help guide visitors out. But those measures reinforce the idea, after dark, this is a different place. Next, origins and timeline. The volcanic rock blanketed the land centuries ago, and the trees grew in dense tangle upon it. With no major logging, Aokigahara remained relatively undisturbed compared to many Japanese forests. Yet the forest reputation changed over time. In folklore, the forest carried associations with yurei, restless spirits of the dead. In Japanese culture, land where people die in isolation becomes tainted, haunted. In the 1960s and 70s, writers began noting the forest's link to suicide. In the early 2000s, police records counted dozens of bodies found each year in the forest, though exact numbers are no longer published by local government, in part to avoid attracting more people. The terrain's silence, its maze of roots and lava caves, the ease with which people might get lost, all contributed to its association with abject loneliness and final decisions. Over decades, the forest nature became linked to tragedy. Volunteers comb the interior for bodies. Visitors tie coloured tape to trees to mark their path out. Because compasses fail, GPS falters, sound disappears. The forest floor is uneven lava, with hidden holes, moss and voids, the canopy heavy and low. People who enter lose sense of direction. In one study of the forest geography and culture, the authors noted that this land absorbs human activity like a vacuum, leaving little sign of normal outdoor noise. Finally, belief versus biology. On the belief side, the forest is said to be filled with spirits, the uri of those abandoned, of lovers, of the outcasts. Stories of Baciu that elderly relatives left in a remote terrain to die are linked to this area. Some believe those acts left lingering energy. The forest is often called haunted. People report hearing voices in mist, shadows among trees, sudden awareness that they are not alone. One visitor described standing near a lava cave when she felt breath behind her, turned and saw nothing but the still rock. Another claimed a flashlight drained from full to zero within minutes while standing in a clearing. On the biology side, the forest's unique physical features help explain the sensation. The dense lava rock absorbs sound. Birds and insects are less common. The vegetation muffles wind so the air becomes still. Because the floor is rugged lava, hikers often move slowly and cautiously. Fatigue sets in. Compasses sometimes behave strangely because of iron-rich volcanic rock altering magnetic fields. GPS and mobile signals drop out, removing a layer of safety. The result? Disorientation, isolation, physical anxiety. Psychologists note that when a visitor expects something unsettling in such an environment, any anomaly, a stray branch, a shifted shadow, a distant footstep, becomes magnified. The forest becomes a mirror for inner states. In the growing dusk, sound drains away. You notice your breathing, the cloth of your jacket against your skin, the muffled thud of your boots. Trails split. Lava crevices lie just off path. The map grows unreliable. The voices of birds stop or shift farther away. A tape ribbon tied to a tree by a previous hiker flaps in the breeze, and you realise the forest has seen many others who left marks behind. At the edge of one clearing, you see a collection of abandoned objects, a bag, a jacket, a note. Volunteers clear some of this, but the items accumulate faster than they remove them. Each bit becomes evidence of finality. Authorities stepping in last decade began patrolling more, placing cameras at trailheads and setting up signage in both Japanese and English. Please reconsider. Talk to someone. Steps meant to deter, but they also mark the place as one where people come to end their lives. That dual nature deepens the boundary effect. Part natural forest reserve, part destination of despair. Tourists might come by daylight with guided tours, but locals, especially at dusk, won't stroll far in. They know the forest means something else once the light fades. As you walk deeper, the forest's weight grows. The angles of light shift, shadows lengthen. You see rope remains around trees, search volunteers' markers, audio gear, smartphones, tablets. Many fail here. The forest doesn't just hide things, it distances you from the world you know. And when you step off the marked trail by accident, you realise how quickly the setting can change. One moment signs, one moment silence, one moment belonging, the next absence. It's not a ghost story told as entertainment. The bodies recovered from this forest are real. The geology is real. The signs, the patrols, the list of missing persons and sudden vans of police in the morning, all are real. What blurs is the line between the physical and the psychological. The forest does not need spirits. Its own shape drives fear. Yet the belief remains strong. Those who die here are part of the forest's legacy. Locals treat the place with caution. Tourism boards discourage prolonged, unsupervised visits. Guides emphasize sticking to trails. Some visitors consider the forest sacred or cursed. Either way, they do not treat it as a playground. In your mind, you mark the spot, where the sign was, where the lava cracked, where the silence began. You know the path back, yet you feel the forest holds you for a moment longer. When you choose to step out, the light returns, sound returns, birdsong returns, but something from deeper in the trees lingers. The boundary remains. Devil's Tramping Ground, North Carolina, USA. You drive a narrow forest road south of Siler City, North Carolina, and the trees close around you. The air is thick with pine needles, and as you approach a small trailhead, you might suddenly notice a patch of earth where nothing grows. This is the clearing known locally as Devil's Tramping Ground, a near-perfect circle in the woods where legend says the devil himself walks. Tonight we step into its shadow to explore belief and biology, Then listen to the voices of witnesses who say something happens here. Belief versus biology. The story goes that the circle, roughly 40 feet in diameter, remains barren because the devil comes each night to walk around it, pacing and thinking evil thoughts. Many locals swear that if you leave an object in the circle overnight, an axe, a rock, even a stick, it will be gone by morning. Dogs brought to the edge of the clearing often whimper or refuse to enter. For generations, the tale has held that the soil is cursed, that nothing will grow, that the forest itself is altered by presence unseen. A popular version says settlers observed the devil's footprints after one dark night and the land never recovered. Others attribute the emptiness to ritual. Still others believe the circle marks a portal between worlds. These beliefs persist because people pass them down, walk the land, hear the stories and feel the difference. On the other side is biology, what scientific eyes find when they arrive. Soil tests have found elevated salt levels. The site lies in a pine forest region where sandy soil and acid levels often slow growth. Some say repeated foot traffic over decades kept vegetation from regrowing. Others point to the local grazing, the cattle, the horse trail compaction that prevented roots getting through. Most researchers agree there is no definitive proof of supernatural activity, and the bare circle may simply be the result of human and natural wear combined. One state study noted that the area's barren patch has shrunk over time and some grass has begun to grow again. Yet even where science offers explanations, the clearing retains its air of mystery, because people say they feel something. They say the silence deepens. They say they see things shift. Now let's enter the witness patchwork. One local teenager from the 1970s recalled hearing dogs howl near the gate of the clearing late at night. He and his friends dared each other to walk to the circle's edge, but the dog backed off, tail tucked, refusing to cross. The boy said the moment they stepped into the circle, the wind seemed to stop and the forest around them went still. They didn't stay long. Another story comes from a paranormal investigator who set up cameras and audio recorders around the clearing. He claimed his equipment flickered. He said he saw a shape pause at the tree line and vanish. He described waking in the morning to find tape ribbons gone, flashlight batteries dead. He left before dawn. A woman visiting the site described a heavier moment. She stepped into the clearing at dusk and heard branches snapping behind her. She turned and saw a figure backing into the trees, then nothing. The moment she passed back over the threshold of the circle, the forest returned to normal ambience. Crickets, frogs, birds. Inside the ring, silence. Many visitors describe that exact effect. Outside the circle, the forest breathes. Inside, it holds its breath. A regional magazine featured a local family who for generations kept watch over the spot. They wouldn't camp nearby after dark, said the silence follows you home, and that mobile phones lost signal when they sat on the ground inside the ring. Some skeptics visited and found nothing extraordinary. A bare patch, litter, vehicle tyre tracks, the sound of distant insects. Yet the belief remains so strong that the clearing has a gate and it lies on private land with signs warning against overnight stays. One survey of testimonies shows that the feeling of unease is common. Even when nothing happens, people walk away with the sense of something untamed. They say the clearing is one thing, what surrounds it is another. The forest around the circle seems darker, the pines older, shadows heavier. The brain may fill in blanks, but when your feet stand on a bare circle and you expect to feel something, your senses sharpen. Walk the land mid-afternoon and you'll see nothing beyond trees, a gated entrance, the circle ringed by low pines and dirt. The path leading in narrows, the forest floor softens, the air smells of damp wood. But at dusk and by night, people say the clearing changes colour. One account, 2 campers lit a fire at sunset near the edge. As darkness fell, the firelight flickered violently though the wind was still. The temperature dropped. They packed up and left. In the morning, the fire pit had been used again, though no vehicles had parked. Whether that's prank or paranormal, the clearing retains the aura of spoken warning. Folklore traces the site back at least to the early 1800s. Local archival notes call the area worthless land, dead and unproductive. Surveyors in 1852 described the circle as grassless and sterile. Locals in oral histories say the clearing has been barren for as long as anyone remembers. The circle lies 10 miles south of Isla City in western Chatham County, surrounded by woodlands and farmland. It remains part of the rural landscape, but the story lifts it out of ordinary. It becomes a place you know by reputation, and belief matters. When you stand in the circle, you may feel your footsteps soft, your breath loud, the forest sounds muted. A man visiting at night described the moment he entered. His flashlight swept the ground, his shadow elongated, the scent of pine sharpened. He felt watched, not by a creature but by the land itself. He left before midnight. Others say they left without being able to explain what spooked them. The clearing doesn't need a demon to work. The bare ground may be all the warning you need, and yet the stories live and evolve. Modern campers tell of night vision cameras, of glowing orbs, of whispers on the wind, or of nothing at all. But the expectation remains. Science may offer soil samples, foot traffic histories, salt deposits. Folklore offers pacing footprints, dominated nights, a devil's circle. But the two combine into one effect, a place where belief and biology merge to hold attention, to unsettle visitors, to mark a boundary between the known woods and the strange clearing. When you stand there, you understand why so many in the region still whisper the old warning. Don't camp alone inside the circle after dark. Dogs will refuse to cross. The wind will change, the trees will lean in silence. Whether the devil walks there or not, the circle holds its story, and the forest keeps watch. Ballyboley Forest, County Antrim, N Ireland. The afternoon light softens as you step into the woods of Ballyboley Forest in County Antrim, Northern Ireland. The air is still, the trees tall and closely planted, and something in the atmosphere seems to lean in. Locals seldom venture far after dusk, and as you move along the narrow track, you begin to sense why. This isn't just any woodland. It carries stories, old and persistent, about stones, time, and things unseen. We enter the heart of those stories now. This forest is said to have once been sacred ground. Archaeological whispers claim circular trenches, and standing stones lie scattered among the trees. Some tell that druids held ritual gatherings here, knotting the earth and sky together in ceremonies lost to memory. The legend says that this place was a thin place, a threshold where the veil between the everyday and the otherworld thinned. In the dusk of Ballyboley, time bends. Walkers speak of sudden drops in temperature, of stepping ahead and finding the path behind slightly changed. One visitor noted that the stone circle she found looked out of place, as though it existed in multiple layers of time at once. There are tales of people who wandered off track and emerged hours later, though no more than a few hundred meters had been covered. Some say clocks stopped, equipment failed, compasses spun. Others describe seeing a figure in a long robe, head bowed beneath a hood, vanish between trunks as though stepping sideways out of one reality into another. The phenomenon of missing time is frequently mentioned. In one account, a teenage group thought they had entered for a quick walk. The sun set, their torches flickered, and when they emerged, the sky was already dark and their anemic snacks gone cold. The stones in the forest are themselves part of the story. One weather-worn slab at the forest edge is known locally as the Watching Stone. It stands upright, almost altar-like. Near it, bush stems lean in as though trying to avoid its stare. Visitors who pause there often report the forest going quiet. Birdsong halts, the wind hushes, then, slowly, small sounds begin. Low moans, shifting branches, something like a breath behind the leaves. The Watching Stone is said to mark the boundary between the seen and unseen, the wood and its mirror. Folklore deepens when the night falls. A small number of locals still speak in low tones of the ones who walk when everyone sleeps. The story goes that in old centuries, travellers passing the lane that skirts the forest vanished, sometimes found days later, changed, silent, staring. Elders warn children, don't stray off the grey lane when the mist rolls in. The mist here gathers fast in hollows, drifting along the forest floor like a river of pale water. One visitor described how the mist came in waves, and each wave seemed slightly behind the last, so that walking through you felt you were entering the same place twice, delayed. Light plays tricks. At certain spots, the canopy closes tight and the sky disappears. One moment you walk beneath bright green leaves, the next beneath a ceiling of branches so close you feel enclosed. Hikers say they often glance ahead and the path seems empty, then turn and find themselves surrounded by trees bearing no trail. The forest track becomes vague. Tape struck to trees by a previous visitor flaps in the wind unseen until it catches your peripheral vision. In the disturbance, you feel your pace slow, your breathing shallower. You're aware of yourself on the forest floor in a way you seldom are in daylight. Another recurring tale, bright shifting lights among the pine trunks. Some dismissed them as torch beams of other strangers. But several Benora readers describe lights dancing just beyond their vision, not moving in a straight line, flickering like lanterns, then gone. One photographer, looking for mist shots, caught in silence and patience what looked like a column of faint bluish light rising above the trees, then collapsing into the ground. The image was grainy, inconclusive, but he swore by what he felt, a pull, an energy, just under his skin. Witnesses also report a sensation of being watched, not by something in front of them, but behind, in the trees, in the stillness between branches. A lone walker paused when he felt his hair stand up. He turned slowly and saw nothing. At that moment, 20 yards away, a bush moved slightly, though there was no breeze. When he walked away, he felt followed by shadows. On exiting to the lane, he found his phone had lost hours of battery life. He doesn't claim to have seen anything, only felt something that lingered after he left. Local tourism boards state the forest is safe during daylight and encourage staying on the marked trails. But beyond those trails, the folklore keeps people away after dark. One landowner told me, after sunset, the forest owns the road. You drive slow then, because anything could emerge from behind the trees. Another old-timer whispered that when the forest is quiet, you might hear the faint tolling of a bell, though no bell exists there now. That story may be folklore, but in the context of the forest, it doesn't feel like one. The layer of ancient stones, missing time tales, shifting lights and unseen watchers converge into a single tone. Ballyboley is a place you enter, but which also enters you. Each story reinforces the next, because someone's phone died, because somebody saw a hooded figure, because the mist rolled in fast and the lane behind changed shape. These don't stand alone, they interplay, repeating shapes of caution and wonder. Folklorists say that forests like Ballyboley act as containers for collective memory. The stones mark human presence long past. The lost travellers become myth. The mist becomes metaphor. Yet the physical contours matter too. Steep slopes, dense conifers, no undergrowth in some areas, slow wind, low light. They all make the senses sharpen. In that sharpening, the forest speaks. When the wind drops, the air fails to carry sound. When you enter a hollow, the trees lean. It's easy for someone's attention to shift sideways, to notice a light, to feel a presence behind them. Walking there at dusk, you might laugh at the stories, but after an hour you'll slow your pace. You'll notice the way the forest hushes. You'll feel the weight of the trees, the faint tremor of branch tips. Your torch will pick up patterns your eyes don't trust. The sub-stories. Children daring each other, hunters turning back before the lane bends, photographers chasing blue lights. These make up the patchwork of memory. In the maps, Ballyboley looks like any other forest plantation, although with plantations of spruce established post-1957. The signage is standard, the tracks wide. Yet if you drive the minor road off the A8 and park near the pine stand, then walk 200 metres in, you might find yourself in a world where the tall trees become a mask. The forest's edge retreats and the stories begin. To locals, the edge of the forest is the safe zone. Beyond the track lies the old wood. Beneath the old wood lie those stories of time, stones, missing hours. Whether you believe in robed figures or ancient druids matters less than what the place does to you once you're inside. And so the forest holds its whispers. The distant rustle, the torch beam flicker, the branch that cracks when no one steps. The stones stand like witnesses, the trees lean tight, the mist comes in waves, and the forest waits quietly for the next pair of boots to break its hush. Epping Forest, England. The forest lies quiet at dusk, the city's edge slipping behind you as you enter a stretch of ancient woodland, where trees stand in silent rows, the undergrowth dimming as the light fades. This is Epping Forest, straddling northeast London and Essex, a landscape of mud, moss-covered trunks and winding trails. When the sun drops, the forest shifts, not just in light but in meaning. Tonight we walk its history, how lore, legend and darkness converged. The story begins centuries ago. The land that is now Epping Forest was once part of the vast royal hunting grounds known as the Forest of Essex. In the 12th century, the area came under forest law, tying it to the monarchy and restricting rights of passage and settlement. Over time, the forest boundaries changed, roads cut through, and by the early 19th century, much of the land around it had become built-up London suburbs, yet the woodland itself held on. In 1878, the forest was formally protected under the Epping Forest Act, ensuring that it remained unenclosed and unbuilt on for public access. The City of London Corporation became the conservator, and the forest entered its modern phase. But even while the forest's legal status shifted, its reputation for danger grew. By the 18th century, the tracks that ran through its trees were used by travellers between London and Newmarket, carrying mail, goods, and wealthy passengers. The forest's dense cover and relative isolation made it ideal for ambush. One of the most notorious figures associated with the forest was the highwayman Dick Turpin. Turpin and others are believed to have used the forest as a hideout, a place to slip away after a robbery, to change horses, or to lie in wait. Branches, hollow trunks, and unlit tracks gave them the advantage of darkness. The legend of Turpin's Cave, an alleged hiding place in the forest, added to the myth but also anchored a real sense of danger. By the 19th and 20th centuries, Epping Forest continued to draw unwanted attention. Bodies of murder victims were discovered in its undergrowth. One case in 1966 saw a police killer evade searchers in the forest for a short time. In 1970 to 71, the Babes in the Wood murders became part of the public memory tied to the forest's dark corners. Even on an official level, the forest was no longer simply a public space. It became one of caution. Local people knew which trails to avoid after dark, which offshoots might harbour the unknown. The map of the forest reflects this layered history. The main ridge runs north-south between the river valleys of the Lee and the Roding, with villages and suburbs pressing in from the east and west. Trails from Chingford, Loughton, Buckhurst Hill slip into thick tree cover. Some of these routes were originally drove roads or coach roads, others are modern recreational tracks. On the edge of the forest you find High Beach, a car park, a cafe, a path into the green world, but 5 minutes deeper the signs fade, the path narrows, and you realise the forest is older than the city around it. In the 19th century, new roads cut through the forest, like the Epping New Road built in 1834, to connect London's expansion. The railway arrived mid-1800s, bringing leisure seekers from London's East End. On a Sunday, thousands of city dwellers would arrive by horse, bus or train just to stroll here. Even so, certain areas remained remote, treetops dark, the forest floor soft and uneven. Because of that terrain, evening visits brought vulnerability. Into that terrain came the legends. Highwaymen like Turpin may have existed, may have hidden in the forest folds, may have robbed passing coaches. The forest structure allowed it. But over time, their deeds became myth, blended with tragedy and fear. The forest turned into a place where travellers dared not linger, where shadows between trees seemed deeper, where ancient camps and unknown graves suggested older perils. One site, Loughton Camp, has Iron Age origins and is surrounded by tales of ghosts and marching soldiers. A visitor in recent decades claimed to hear drumbeats at dusk, though no official hearing confirmed anything. Still, such tales endure. More than the legends of robbers or soldiers, the forest became a burial ground of sorts for secrets. Because of its size and proximity to the city, people suspected that criminals dumped bodies here. Hundreds of pages of crime reports reference Epping Forest. Between 2003 and 2005, unidentified remains were found in remote sections. Some cases remain unsolved. The forest, by night especially, is no longer just trees and trails. It is a place where what happened yesterday still echoes. As dusk falls, walkers today still speak of the same caution. They know that beyond the main car park, the forest trails diverge. Some leads to open heath, some to ancient woodland. A narrow path alongside the A104 may feel safe in daylight, but once the city lights fade behind you, the forest hushes. The trees loom, the wind drops, and so much of your normal sense of orientation drifts away. Locals, especially from East London, often tell newcomers, don't go far after dark, just stay near the open areas. The forest's history of lore, legend, and dark incidents shapes that caution. The tracks once used by mail coaches now serve mountain bikers. The hideouts once exploited by robbers now see walkers in head torches, but the same terrain, the same cover, the same isolation remains. In places where autumn mist clings low among the trunks, where the path bends and leads into deeper wood, the sense of unease persists. Today the forest is still mapped, still maintained, still frequented. But the memory of its past remains part of every tree and every hollowed trunk. When you stand at the forest's edge, You look into something that is both old and living, and when you walk deeper toward the ridge, the history of highwaymen, of secret trails, of bodies, and of night darkness walks with you. When the streetlights end and only your torch remains, you sense why the forest kept its reputation. The coach roads through it brought fear as well as travel. The gravelly soil meant fewer markers, fewer signs. The centuries of legend mean that even as crime rates fall, the shadow of risk stays. The tracks that once carried the wealthy and vulnerable still carry you, and the forest still listens. Wychwood Forest, Oxfordshire, England. The wind comes in soft and low among the trees of Wychwood Forest, slipping beneath the canopy, carrying a hush that makes the woodland feel larger than it is. You walk under ancient oaks and beeches whose trunks bear scars of time, and you sense that this place has held more than just trees. Wychwood was once royal hunting land. It was once common wood for people and beasts, and it has always carried stories of death, of warning, of what happens when the boundary between man and nature blurs. Tonight we go deeper into those tales. The forest name is ancient, derived from the Anglo-Saxon tribe known as the Hwitcher. The wood was once called Hwitchawudu, wood of the Hwitcher. Over the centuries, Wychwood shrank from vast royal forest to a surviving fragment, a place where the wild edge of Oxfordshire meets human settlement. In medieval times, it was designated a royal forest, subject to forest law, reserved for hunting by kings and managed by foresters, whose job was to guard both deer and the woods themselves. That role meant the forest was never quite just a walk in the woods. It was a place of rights, of rules, of fear of stepping out of line. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the forest edges softened, paths opened, and human presence increased. But so too did legend. One of the most persistent tales is that of Amy Robsart, whose mysterious death in 1560, she was found at the foot of stairs in Cumnor, and connection to Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, tied her ghost to the wood. According to the story, her spirit appeared in Wychwood, and Dudley died shortly after. The tale may combine court politics with tragedy, but to locals the forest became a place where seeing her meant doom or change. Visitors have reported glimpsing a woman in old dress near the trees, or hearing footsteps on a path when no one is there. Beyond that single legend, the entire forest appears in folk tales as a place of death omens and fading boundaries. A horse-drawn carriage has been said to emerge from the wood when moonlight is weak, the driver unseen, the passengers silent children weeping. On other nights, walkers report an old man in forest green, watching them from beneath the branches, then disappearing. Some say the forest mist gathers early, even on dry nights, and cloaks the path ahead so you cannot see more than 2 paces. Others speak of a quiet that is too deep, the kind where your own breathing fills your ears. Wychwood's story is built on place as much as on myth. For centuries the wood gave game to the crown, grazing to local commoners, timber to foresters. In the age of disafforestation, mid-19th century, much was cleared, rights ended, new farms appeared, and yet the remaining wood retained its old mark. When the hunt stopped, the laws changed, the forest became freer, but perhaps less safe in human terms. Paths once used by deer and foresters became trails of remote woodland. Hollow trees, old drove roads, thick undergrowth. These are the corridors of story. There is a specific warning tradition. If you see the figure of the woman in the clearing, you will suffer sorrow. If you hear the coach bells, death is soon in the family. Whether one believes it or not, the belief shapes behaviour. Locals say the forest after dusk is not the same as by daylight. The trees lean in, the branches lift different shadows, the undergrowth closes faster. One guest walking near Charlbury felt the ground change when he stepped off the marked path. Suddenly the soil was damp and the trees older, the trail gone. He found his way back only by following distant lights of the village. Some historians and folklore scholars note that old burial mounds, barrows, and ancient trackways lie inside Wychwood. They point out that when land is used for death or passage and then returns to wood, stories attach. In Wychwood, a long barrow near Ascot under Wychwood reminds us the land held ritual thousands of years ago. That long, deep time meets the more recent time of sceptre and saddle and poacher. From environment to memory, these layers build. The forest is not simply haunted, it is layered. Every dusk you sense how the forest bounds shift. The road from Milton under Wychwood grows narrower, the hedges close in, the last houses recede. A black gate warns of private land, but beyond that the tracks continue, less worn. The light dims, the birds quiet, and you feel the forest reclaiming you. The path slips back into older wood. A branch cracks. You think it might be the wind, but the air has stillened. In that moment, the story takes hold. Some recent visitors filmed shadow shapes near the old fencing of Cornbury Park, supposedly the kitchen gardens to the Dukes of Marlborough, themselves tied to forest history. One amateur ghost hunter used night vision and recorded motes of light that moved horizontally. He later admitted those might have been floating leaves or insects, but at the time he said he froze. The forest looked back at him. Another couple camping near Kingstanding Farm awoke to the sound of a carriage, iron wheels on gravel, though no road bent nearby, no carriage passed since the 19th century. They flicked on their torch and saw only darkness. They left before morning. The belief system holds that the forest boundary is not merely physical but temporal. You walk by day as you might in any woodland, but when evening comes you cross into a different frame. The old paths, the hidden mounds, the post-railroad quiet, all combine to make your senses sharper. Step a few strides off the track and the forest seems to rearrange. The trees close, the air thickens, your phone signal drops. A fellow walker described it as the wood swallowing the trail. He said he felt the branches closing above him until the sky was gone. Folklore attaches names, Lady of Wychwood, Phantom Coach, crying children in white dress, to the place. But the ethics of those tales matter. They warn. Stay on the path. Don't linger after dark. Respect the boundary between man and the old wood. For people who have lived here, grandchildren of foresters and hunters, the forest is still known for its edge. On autumn nights, they avoid the deep tracks, especially when mist curls across the fields. They keep their children close and don't let cars run far into the wood unlit. In many ways, Wychwood Forest remains a living archive of Britain's layered past. Royal forest law, common land, rituals older than record, modern conservation. That the forest also holds stories of ghosts and omens is not a surprise. The same land that gave timber to navies once withheld testimony. The same trees that hid deer now hide figures. When you walk there at dusk, you carry all that with you, rites and legends, forest law and folklore. The boundary is not only metal gate or signpost, it's the moment the light drops, the path narrows, and you realise you are deep in wood where story grows from shadow. Old House Woods, Virginia, USA. You drive west of the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, where the land slopes gently down to salt marsh and the trees press in silver grey in the late afternoon light. In one quiet stretch, tucked just off Beach Haven Road near Diggs in Matthews County, lies a small woodland known as Old House Woods. It looks like any coastal patch of forest, pines, oaks, faint paths, but what locals say on still nights makes it different. This chapter gathers the first-hand accounts from people who visited, heard, or felt something there. One long-time resident, a merchant in nearby Matthews Courthouse, said it plainly, "Old House Woods is haunted. My advice to you is, keep away from there. You can't defy the guardian spirits that watch over the place and get away with it." He told how, as a youth, he drove a horse and buggy past the woods late at night, on a call to fetch a doctor, and once the bay was behind them, the animals refused to move. The buggy felt heavier, the trees darker. Another account comes from a local fisherman who anchored his boat near White's Creek at dusk and walked the trail into the woods just a few yards. He stopped when he heard the distant clang of a metal object, though no one else was there, just the dim outline of trees. He turned to leave and his compass, he said, spun. He picked up his pace, the pine needles underfoot thick and muffling. When his boat engine started reluctantly, he felt relieved. Several ghost tour websites record a litany of different phenomena in Old House Woods. Ghost ships sailing through the trees, British redcoats pacing at dawn, pirate gold buried under the bogland, headless cows grazing in the dark, a burnt-out colonial house that rose from its own ashes. One frequent story, a visitor left a coin on an old stump and found it gone by morning. Another, two teenagers camped near the wood's edge heard footsteps circling their tent at 3 a.m, though nothing disturbed the branches. A woman who visited with a local guide described the moment their group entered the forest. The tide of cicadas stopped, the wind seemed muffled, and her radio lost signal. She pulled out her phone and found battery dropping quickly despite little use. The trail marker ahead turned out to be the same marker she'd passed 10 minutes earlier, but the trees looked slightly different. Distances changed. She left the group to recheck the path, caught a glimpse of a figure in colonial dress turning a corner, then nothing. She said the older guide told her later, "You saw one of them." Even park rangers and state historians have commented on the unusual stress people feel here. In one newsletter, they noted that the forest is probably one of the most haunted places in Virginia, citing local oral history and scattered anecdotal evidence. A guided walk once filmed a low-lying fog inside the woods that persisted when it had cleared just outside. The guide turned to his flashlight's light beam and joked, "Either the woods want to hide something or we walked into it." An audio interview published in a local blog recorded voices. A visitor described hearing a horse's hoofbeat in the undergrowth though no horse was near, seeing a faint lantern glow that drifted sideways behind the trees, and feeling the air grow cold. His car was parked less than 200 yards away, but by the time he returned, the horn failed and his radio wouldn't change station. He left the key in the ignition and walked away. Isolated accounts exist too. A couple walking the Bayside Trail just before sunset heard laughter echoing behind them, turned, and saw a figure in naval uniform from the late 1700s standing on the edge of the marsh. They froze. The man tipped his hat and vanished into the reeds. They didn't speak until the next morning when they reached home. The voice of the woman in the house said simply, "We don't go there after dark." Another story. A small crew of paranormal investigators spent 3 nights inside the woods. On the second night they placed thermal cameras, recorded audio loops and sat in full silence. At dawn they reviewed the audio, a male voice in faint but clear English saying, "Leave now." The location was mapped. The tech lead said the voice was not in range of their mic but still inside the woods. They walked out at first light. These witness patches show common threads. Machines fail or act strangely. Sound and light behave oddly. Humans have unexpected encounters with forms or feelings. Locals advise avoidance after dark. Whether one believes in ghost soldiers or just in odd acoustics and dense forest terrain, the effect remains the same. The shape of the land reinforces it. Old House Woods is coastal, not deep inland. The salt marsh lies close. Water reflects light into the forest floor. Trails are narrow, often unmarked, and the trees thick. Locals say the woods close in sooner than most. One early walker noted that 5 minutes in and the sky vanished behind branches. With no clear horizon and similar-looking trunks repeating, orientation becomes difficult. When the air shifts from bay breeze to forest stillness, the change feels profound. A retired resident described nights when the woods glowed faintly. Not from moonlight, he insisted, but from something in the trees. Small lights like lanterns nosing past trunks, always just out of focus. He said dogs bolted at the edge and refused to enter the first time. Later, when he went back with others, he found paw prints leading in but none coming out. He followed them muddy-footed until they vanished beneath a pile of leaves. One of the more persistent tales remains the burned-out house. An 18th century framed building once stood inside the woods. According to local law, it burned once, extinguished itself, then burned again until rubble. A modern-day relic still marks its foundation. Visitors report hearing floorboards creak where none remain, seeing faint light from inside the woodland, and feeling drawn to walk to the old house relic, then discover they're deeper in the woods than they rationally should be. To locals, these stories aren't tourist hooks, they're cautionary. A landowner said bluntly, "When the tide comes in, the woods fill with fog. If you're inside when that happens, you're walking blind, and then you may notice sounds that weren't there before." In Matthews, residents carry the simple rule: don't wander old house woods alone at night. The warning is about more than ghosts. It is about isolation, changing terrain, loss of signal, and the ineffable weight of woodland memory. People who have walked the woods at dusk often say the moment when streetlights of the bay fade behind them, something shifts. The horizon recedes, the sky collapses into branches, the marsh air grows colder. The sounds of crickets dim and a deeper silence fills your ears. The forest is familiar in daytime, but by night it becomes something else. Those who stay late tell of the same thing: a tapping on their shoulders, a voice in the breeze, a shape merging into moonlight. They don't always report the same thing, but they always say the same feeling. The woods did not want them there. Whether you believe the stories or not, the thread of witness voices is strong. From merchant to fisherman, from camper to paranormal team, the reports span decades. The stories overlap but do not always align. The shapes differ. The times differ. What remains constant is the impression Old House Woods contains something that resists explanation, that remains rooted in the local community and their nightly warnings. The forest waits, quiet, and the next visitor may feel what the last did. Overtoun Bridge and Glen, Scotland. The rain comes and goes quickly in the hills above Dumbarton. You drive a narrow country road, mist hanging low, and then the trees part to reveal a stone bridge standing alone over a deep ravine. It looks harmless, graceful even, with arched sides and moss along the parapet. Yet locals know this place by a darker name. This is Overtoun Bridge, a quiet structure that has puzzled Scotland for decades. To most people it's just a bridge. But to many others, it's something else. A place where dogs leap to their deaths for reasons no one can fully explain. Built in 1895, Overtoun Bridge was part of the old estate of Overtoun House. The estate road once led through wooded land and across this gorge to the mansion beyond. The bridge spans nearly 50 feet above a rocky burn hidden under thick branches that muffle the sound of water below. It's peaceful, but unnervingly still. The stone is pale, and in the damp air it seems to breathe. Those who walk here say it's beautiful, yes, but unsettling. Since the mid-20th century, stories began to spread. Dog walkers spoke of pets that suddenly ran to the wall and leapt over, sometimes without hesitation. Reports came from all types of breeds, often long-snouted ones, collies, retrievers, greyhounds. The strange pattern repeated itself again and again. Calm one second, gone the next. Witnesses described the same details, no bark, no warning, just a sudden bolt toward the parapet. The fall is fatal more often than not. As the incidents increased, people began to look for reasons. Belief took root first. Some said the bridge was haunted, that spirits from the nearby Overtoun estate roamed here, visible to animals but unseen by human eyes. A local legend told of the White Lady of Overtoun, a ghostly figure said to wander the bridge in grief after the death of her husband. Others whispered that the land was cursed, that strange energies in the gorge confused the senses of any creature that entered it. For many years, villagers refused to walk their dogs near the bridge at all, especially on misty days when the air grew heavy and the valley below disappeared into fog. Then came the investigators, scientists, behaviourists and skeptics who searched for patterns that belief could not explain. One of the most convincing theories pointed to smell. The woods beneath the bridge are home to small animals like mink and squirrels, whose strong scent can excite hunting breeds. The wind funnels through the ravine and up toward the bridge, carrying those scents at nose level. A dog with its head low might catch that smell and rush forward, believing it leads straight ahead rather than into a drop. From a human perspective, the parapet seems high, but from a dog's eye view, the wall and the ground beyond look continuous. The animal leaps, expecting to land on soil, and instead meets empty air. Another explanation focuses on how the bridge was built. The stone parapets taper inward slightly, creating an illusion of solidity when viewed from a lower angle. Combined with the scent from below, that visual trick could make the edge seem safe. In addition, the bridge's surface is lined with moss and lichen, which can distort depth perception for dogs sensitive to movement and colour. When excitement and confusion mix, instinct takes over, but not everyone accepts the scientific view. Some residents insist the bridge has a presence. They talk about the mood that settles there, the sudden quiet, the sense of being watched, the way the air seems thicker above the ravine. Walkers have said that even without animals, you can feel the shift. Birds fall silent, footsteps echo strangely, and sometimes the faint rush of the river sounds closer than it should. Those who live nearby often describe the bridge as a thin place, where the world feels slightly misaligned. Whether or not that means anything supernatural depends on who you ask, but the reputation persists. Overtoun House itself adds to the atmosphere. The mansion, built in the 19th century, stands just beyond the trees. For decades it served various roles: an estate home, a convalescent facility, a refuge, but its heavy architecture and long shadow keep it tied to the same mood as the bridge. Visitors who explore both say the forest around them feels older than the buildings, as though the structures merely rest on borrowed ground. The geography of the place helps explain why the stories endure. The bridge crosses a narrow gorge carved by Overtoun Burn, a small stream that disappears into thick vegetation below. On each side, the terrain rises steeply, covered with trees that block sunlight and distort sound. Even in daytime, the ravine feels enclosed. When fog rolls in, which it often does, the bridge can vanish into grey from only a few metres away. People who've walked there describe it as stepping into a space outside of time, neither forest nor road, just stone and silence hanging over emptiness. One afternoon, a local man recalled seeing his dog suddenly freeze halfway across the bridge. It stared at the same spot near the right-hand parapet, fur raised, tail rigid. Then it began to whine, backing away until its leash went tight. The man pulled the animal aside and left immediately. He never walked that route again. Another visitor described hearing a faint, high-pitched sound, almost like a whistle coming from the ravine. Moments later, her retriever tried to jump. She caught its harness in time. Accounts like these appear in local papers and archives going back decades. The consistency of detail keeps the mystery alive, even as science offers answers. Behavioural tests using scent trails and mock walls have shown that excited dogs can indeed misjudge a drop under the right conditions. Still, the number of reports and the emotional charge around them have turned Overtoun Bridge into something symbolic, a place where rational explanation and superstition collide. At dusk, the bridge looks peaceful again. The stone arches fade into the woods, and the burn below murmurs faintly through the trees. Yet anyone who knows its history feels a subtle tension. The walls seem too low, the silence too deep, the beauty too still. Travellers who pass through often pause, not to take pictures but to hold their dogs close and hurry across. The old road continues uphill toward Overtoun House, but the memory of that quiet span stays behind. Half mystery, half caution, suspended between what people believe and what nature allows. Isla de las Muñecas, Xochimilco, Mexico. The air in Xochimilco always feels heavy with history. The canals stretch out like veins, carrying slow green water through the last remnants of what once was the floating garden system of ancient Mexico. The Chinampas, man-made islands built from mud and reeds centuries ago, still host life. Some hold crops, some homes, and one holds something entirely different, an island draped in dolls. Their heads, limbs and blank eyes stare from trees and walls, forming a sight that both attracts and repels those who pass by. This place is called Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls, and it is unlike anywhere else on Earth. Locals tell you the story begins with a man named Julian Santana Barrera. He lived alone here, on this small island deep in the canals, far from the sound of the city. Around the 1950s, Julian began to hear whispers among the people in nearby Chinampas, whispers of a tragedy. They said a young girl had drowned in the canal near his home, her body found tangled among the reeds. Not long after, Julian found a doll floating in the water. Perhaps it belonged to her, perhaps not, but he hung it from a tree as an offering, a gesture of respect for her soul. That one act began what would become one of Mexico's strangest shrines. Over the following years, Julian continued to collect dolls. He gathered them from garbage heaps, canals and markets. Some were gifts from visitors, others were broken or discarded toys left behind by families from nearby towns. He hung them from branches, nailed them to walls and tied them to poles. They multiplied, covering every inch of the island. To him, each doll carried a purpose, protection against evil, a tribute to lost children, or simply company in his isolation. Visitors who met him described him as kind but withdrawn, a man who spoke softly and sometimes said the dolls whispered to him in the night. In time, people began to hear about the island. The sight of hundreds of dolls hanging in silence stirred curiosity. Some locals avoided the area completely, calling it cursed. Others brought offerings, believing the dolls held power to protect or heal. Boatmen, called tragineros, would point to the island from afar and warn visitors not to dock after sunset. They said that when the sun went down and the canals darkened, the dolls came alive. Some swore they saw the heads turn, the eyes blink, or the arms move slightly as if following their gaze. When journalists and photographers arrived in later decades, they found Julian still living among the dolls, tending to his garden and speaking of spirits. He said he felt the girl's presence constantly, that her soul never left the island. He claimed she protected him, but also demanded more offerings, so he continued to collect. Hundreds became thousands. The dolls decayed in the weather, losing limbs and hair, growing moss and mildew, but Julian never removed them. He said their broken faces showed their truth, that they too had died in their own way. Julian's life ended as strangely as the legend began. In 2001, after 50 years of living on the island, he drowned in the same canal where the girl's body was said to have been found. Neighbours discovered him floating near the shore. To them, it confirmed what they had long believed, that the island was haunted, that the spirits he honoured had finally taken him. Since his death, his family and caretakers have maintained the island, preserving the dolls and welcoming visitors who arrive by boat, though many still refuse to stay once the sky darkens. Those who visit Isla de las Muñecas describe an immediate change in atmosphere. The trip begins with colour, painted boats gliding through calm waters, music echoing faintly from other canals. But as you approach the island, the noise fades. The trees lean low, their branches thick, the dolls hanging from them in silent clusters. Some are nearly whole, others have missing eyes or cracked faces. A faint smell of damp wood and plastic lingers in the air. The wind moves through the branches and the dolls creak as if whispering to one another. Even on bright days, the island feels dim, the sunlight filtered through leaves and the weight of so many unblinking faces. Caretakers warn visitors not to take anything, not even a fallen doll's arm or a piece of clothing. The belief is that the dolls hold trapped energy, and removing one disturbs the balance of the place. People leave gifts instead, new dolls, ribbons or candles, adding to the ever-growing collection. At dusk, boatmen who pass nearby often speed up, saying that after dark the island wakes. They tell stories of whispers echoing over the water, of faint laughter, of eyes glowing faintly in the trees. Researchers who have visited the island offer simpler explanations. The dolls sway with the wind, and in the dim light their movements look unnatural. The wet environment warps the plastic faces, stretching their features into grim expressions. The silence amplifies every sound. A branch breaking, a string twisting, a doll's hollow body knocking against bark. The human mind, primed by suggestion, fills in the rest. But even they admit that Isla de las Muñecas feels different from anywhere else, the result of decades of devotion by a man whose motives, sincere or superstitious, transformed the landscape. Today, the island remains one of the strangest destinations in Mexico. It's accessible only by boat, a journey that takes about 2 hours from the main docks of Xochimilco. The ride begins with colour and music, but ends in quiet. When the boat stops beside the island, the sound of insects and rustling branches replaces everything else. Visitors step off onto the muddy shore and follow a short path through the trees. Dolls hang from every angle, some new, some decaying, all watching. In the centre stands the small hut where Julian lived, preserved just as he left it. Inside lies a shrine to him and to the girl who started it all, surrounded by candles and more dolls. Few people stay long. The island seems to press in, the eyes of the dolls following as you walk. Some visitors claim they hear footsteps behind them. Others say they feel a sudden drop in temperature. The caretakers always smile when asked if they believe the place is haunted. They don't answer directly. They just say that the dolls are alive in their own way, that they remember everyone who visits. As the boat pushes off again and you drift away, the island grows smaller, fading into the trees. The dolls become silhouettes against the setting sun, their shapes lost among the branches. The canal is silent except for the oars' rhythm on the water. Behind you, the island of the dolls remains, hundreds of faces swaying gently in the wind, guarding a story that refuses to die. Bhangarh Fort, edge of Aravalli, India. The heat of the Rajasthani sun fades quickly as the day draws to an end. Along the dusty road leading into the Aravalli hills, the stone outline of Bhangarh Fort rises in the distance. From afar it looks like a forgotten city swallowed by time and scrub forest. As you get closer, the wind grows still, and the sound of birds quiets as if the land itself knows what comes next. Just before the entrance, a weathered sign stands in the dirt. It carries a simple warning. No one is allowed to enter after sunset, and no one may stay before sunrise. The message isn't poetic or exaggerated, it's official, placed there by the Archaeological Survey of India. The warning alone gives Bhangarh a certain weight. Few ancient sites in India carry such a rule. It's not about ticket hours or safety checks, it feels older than that, deeper. Locals nod to it without question. Guides lead tourists inside during the day, but by late afternoon the tone shifts. They watch the sun and glance toward the gate. No one jokes about staying. When the last rays of light sink behind the hills, the fort empties almost instantly. It isn't only because of the sign, it's because of what people believe lives within its walls. Bhangarh Fort was built in the late 16th century by Raja Bhagwant Das for his son, Madho Singh. At its height, it was a thriving city. Palaces, temples, markets, and houses spread across the hillside. But something happened here. Within 2 centuries it was abandoned, its people gone. What remained was a labyrinth of crumbling walls and empty courtyards, left to the dust and wind. No official record explains why the fort fell silent, so stories filled the space. One legend tells of a holy man named Baba Balanath, who lived nearby before the fort was built. He allowed construction under one condition, that no building should cast its shadow on his dwelling. The prince agreed, but over time higher walls rose and the shadow reached the sadhu's home. Enraged, he cursed the city, saying it would fall and never be rebuilt. In the years that followed, Bhangarh was struck by famine, conflict, and death. The curse, they say, took hold. Another story is older still, told in the nearby villages for generations. It speaks of a sorcerer who fell in love with Princess Ratnavati, the ruler's daughter. The man prepared a love potion and sent it to her disguised as perfume. But the princess saw through the trick and poured the liquid onto a boulder, which rolled down and crushed him. With his dying breath, the sorcerer cursed the land, saying the city would turn to dust and all who lived there would die before sunrise. Soon after, an invading army destroyed the fort and its people vanished. Since then, the ruins have stood untouched. By day, Bhangarh looks ancient but harmless. The main gate opens to wide courtyards where monkeys sit on ledges and goats wander through the remains of old markets. The temples still stand, with faded carvings and quiet air inside. Children from nearby villages play in the open grounds, and visitors climb the stone steps to the palace on the hill. But even in daylight, there's a silence that doesn't feel natural. No birds nest inside the walls. The air feels heavy, as if sound doesn't travel the way it should. When the sun begins to fall, the atmosphere shifts. The colour of the fort changes from gold to grey. The forest outside grows darker, and the hills cast long shadows across the ruins. Locals gather their things and leave in groups. You can feel the tension rise in small ways. The guide starts speaking softly, the air cools fast, and even the monkeys move toward the trees. Those who have tried to stay past dusk tell unsettling stories. Some claim to hear whispers from the empty corridors, others describe the clang of metal or the faint sound of music from nowhere. There are stories of figures seen at the windows, of footsteps that echo on stone floors long after everyone has gone. A few have said they saw a faint blue light flicker in the upper palace and disappear when approached. None of these accounts have been proven, yet they persist, told and retold by villagers and travellers alike. The fort's position in the landscape seems to feed the myth. It sits at the border between civilization and wilderness. Beyond it stretch the dry forests of the Aravalli, home to snakes, bats and leopards. After dark, that wilderness presses in, swallowing everything. The sounds of insects and wind bouncing off the old walls create echoes that make it impossible to tell where a noise begins or ends. The ruins themselves form a maze, with staircases that lead nowhere and rooms that end abruptly. Anyone lost here at night would struggle to find the way out. Locals treat the ban as sacred. They say the fort belongs to another world once the sun goes down. The people of the nearby village of Golakabas close their windows early and avoid lighting bright lamps that face the ruins. They call the fort a shrap, a place cursed by fate. Some even say that no roof built in the old town of Bhangarh ever stays intact. The curse ensures that every new structure collapses eventually. Engineers and archaeologists dismiss this as coincidence, but the locals do not test it. A few explorers and film crews have tried to challenge the legend. They've gone in with cameras and night vision equipment, documenting the fort after dark. What they find depends on belief. Some capture only silence and dust. Others swear they recorded voices or caught the faint sound of movement from the upper levels. One team left at midnight after one of their members claimed he felt someone tap his shoulder in the dark, though no one was behind him. The place leaves an impression even on skeptics. Inside the fort, the architecture still speaks of its former grandeur. The main gate, known as the Lahori Gate, leads to smaller arches and passageways that once formed a bustling marketplace. The Gopinath temple stands mostly intact, its carvings delicate despite the centuries. The royal palace sits higher on the slope looking down at the valley. The wind passes through every opening, whispering through corridors where courtiers once walked. There are no ceilings anymore, just open sky and falling leaves. If you walk through the ruins in the late afternoon, you can feel the strange duality of the place. It's beautiful and peaceful, but the silence has weight. The light fades quickly behind the hills, and the last colours of sunset brush against the stone before vanishing. The shadows deepen, the temperature drops, and the air grows still. It's at this moment that the line between day and night feels visible, the moment before the fort becomes off limits once again. No one argues with the sign at the gate. The guards close it when the last visitor leaves, and by the time darkness falls, Bhangarh Fort belongs entirely to the night. Jatinga, Assam, India. The sun dips behind the hills of Assam, and the narrow ridge above the village of Jatinga begins to lose light. In that fading dusk, a remarkable and unsettling event has taken place every year for nearly a century. Birds, various species of bitterns, herons, kingfishers, descend upon the village in the monsoon months, especially between September and November. They fly erratically, collide with buildings, lights, trees. Locals once called it madness, now scientists call it a puzzle. On certain nights, when fog rolls down the hills and wind gusts sweep the ridge, the birds behave differently. They call it bird suicide, though experts prefer bird disorientation. The ridge sits at roughly 600 metres elevation in the Dima Hasao district. The terrain is steep, the ridge narrow, the forests dense. As the monsoon ends and lightning fades, the mist descends early, and on moonless nights, artificial light from the village becomes stark against the dark sky. Belief holds one side of the story. Locals once believed evil spirits strode the skies on those nights, that the birds were called by ghosts, or maybe even being punished. Tribal folklore described lamps in windows attracting restless souls, or birds falling because they were led by the dead. In early decades, the villagers said the birds came at night, not in daylight, unbidden and in droves, flapping toward lights, crying, crashing. Some locals even collected the fallen birds. Some believed the event was an omen. These attitudes shaped how the village engaged with the phenomenon. It was part natural, part supernatural. On the flip side, biology offers a grounded explanation. Ornithologists found that the birds affected are mostly juveniles or local migrants, flying low in poor visibility, drawn toward bright lamps as if they mark safe ground. The ridge's geography matters, narrow and fog-filled with plunging forest slopes and dense canopy. Strong winds disrupt their flight, mist hides the horizon, and the only visible light appears to be the village lamps. Disoriented birds drop from the sky, either hitting obstacles or simply falling exhausted. Researchers at the Zoological Survey of India noted this behaviour decades ago and pointed to high wind nights during monsoon withdrawal. The combination of fog, steep incline, artificial light and weak flight creates conditions where birds crash without malice. The belief and biology intertwine here. A bird falls, a villager sees it and remembers the old tales of spirits. A researcher counts species and wind speeds. The event becomes one of living memory and natural anomaly. On moonless nights, the same slope where lights glow below becomes a trap of illusions. Locals still tell tourists, don't shine your torch at the ridge after dark. They know the stories, they know the patterns. The village itself lies quiet. The road climbs up from the plains, tea gardens break into forest, and as evening comes, the ridge's wind can leap. The forest edge, the dense brush, the fog begin to close in. Villagers lock their gates, tourists depart. Outside the hours associated with the phenomenon, birdwatchers arrive. But when the wind picks up, the mist thickens and the lamps turn on, something shifts. The birds begin to come. Walking that ridge, you see the signs. Lampposts still lit at dusk, narrow side tracks into the woods, electrical wires humming, mist between trees, the distant flash of water. The species noted include tiger bitterns, little egrets, pond herons, kingfishers, birds that normally fly at dusk but rarely so concentrated. Conservation efforts say the numbers are falling now, yet the pattern remains. When you stand in the village beneath the lamps, you sense the boundary. Light and dark, forest and ridge, flight and fall. You know that the next bird might enter the light, might pause above the ground and then lose momentum or orientation. You remember what locals told you. The lamps draw, the wind twists, the night shifts. Neither spirits nor science may fully capture the moment, but the interplay of belief and biology gives it meaning. As the monsoon recedes and dry leaves crack underfoot, the birds start their descent. You hear a flutter, a crash, a quiet thud in the dark. One moment you're standing at the edge of wind and voice. The next you're aware of the ridge behind, the forest ahead, the lamps below and the mist above. The birds come, the lights glow, the night listens. For the villagers of Jatinga, the phenomenon is not entertainment, it is warning. Don't stand on the ridge alone after dusk, they say. Don't mistake lamps for safe ground. For ornithologists, it is data. Wind speed, visibility, lamp intensity, species count. For you, the moment remains, a threshold of sight and sound where birds fall and stories rise. Sundarbans, mangrove forests, India, Bangladesh. The Sundarbans stretch like a living maze at the edge of the Bay of Bengal, where India and Bangladesh meet in a weave of tide and earth. The air smells of salt and silt, and the mangrove roots rise from the mud like black fingers. This is one of the most dangerous forests on the planet, not because of ghosts or monsters, but because of tigers. Yet for those who live here, the danger has never been just physical. The people of the Sundarbans speak of gods, demons, and spirits that rule these shifting waters. The forest, they say, belongs to them first. Humans enter only on borrowed time. To reach the forest, you follow the river channels that twist and split until land and water are almost the same thing. Villages cling to the edges of embankments, built high to survive the tides. Wooden boats drift past fields of rice and patches of mangrove where the roots form dense walls. There are no roads here. The forest is both a home and a threat. Every villager who ventures into it knows the rules. You do not go alone, you carry a charm. And before your first step into the trees, you whisper a prayer to Bon Bibi. Bon Bibi is the guardian spirit of the Sundarbans. She is worshipped by both Hindus and Muslims, a rare bridge between faiths in this part of the world. Her shrines stand at the borders of villages, painted in red and yellow, decorated with small clay lamps and offerings of flowers. People bow to her before collecting honey or firewood, before setting their nets in the creeks. Bon Bibi is said to protect honest people who take only what they need from the forest. Her name means Lady of the Forest, and her protection ends where greed begins. Every story about Bon Bibi also speaks of her opposite, Dokhin Rai, the tiger spirit. He is said to be a powerful demon who once ruled the mangrove forests and devoured anyone who dared to enter. Bon Bibi fought him and forced him to promise that he would no longer harm people who entered the forest with respect. But Dokhin Rai's hunger, villagers say, never truly faded. He still prowls in the form of the Bengal tiger, waiting for those who cross the line between need and desire. In the delta's dense mangroves, tigers are not myth. They are real, and they move silently through the mud, their orange fur streaked with the same colours as the setting sun. They swim across rivers, they appear without warning. Over the years, countless fishermen, honey collectors and woodcutters have vanished into this forest, leaving behind only torn nets or empty boats. In some villages, nearly every family has lost someone. When that happens, the people don't say the tiger attacked. They say Dokhin Rai claimed another soul. Life here depends on that uneasy balance. To survive, villagers must enter the tiger's realm. The honey collectors, known as Muli, venture deep into the forest each spring, moving in groups of 4 or 5, each carrying a wooden box to smoke out the bees. Before they go, they hold a small ceremony. They light incense. They leave offerings at the shrine of Bon Bibi, bananas, rice and a clay lamp. They tie red threads around their wrists and wear masks on the back of their heads, painted with wide, staring eyes. The mask is meant to fool the tiger, since tigers usually attack from behind. Those rituals are not superstition here, they are survival. To the people of the Sundarbans, the forest is not just a place of danger, but a living being that must be respected. When a tiger kills a person, there is mourning but rarely anger. Many believe the spirit world must be appeased. Families hold quiet prayers instead of revenge. They say that to curse a tiger is to curse the forest itself. At night, when the tide rises and the moon reflects on the black water, the forest changes. The air grows thick, and the sound of insects turns into a steady hum. The mangroves seem to move with the tide, their roots shifting in the dark water. In the distance, the cries of deer echo through the trees. Some say that's how you know a tiger is near, when the forest goes silent right after. Villagers avoid walking outside the embankments once the sun goes down. Even the dogs refuse to wander too far. The geography of the Sundarbans shapes everything. The land is divided into countless islands, many of which vanish during the monsoon. Salt water floods the fields and the soil grows barren. Those who depend on fishing and honey must constantly rebuild their homes and lives. The forest shifts boundaries daily. What is dry today may be underwater tomorrow. Maps of this region are never permanent, and neither is the human claim over it. To the locals, this instability is proof of the god's presence. The forest reminds them every year who truly controls it. In recent decades, scientists and conservationists have come to study this strange balance between humans, tigers, and faith. They've documented hundreds of tiger attacks, but also noted how few retaliations occur. The villagers' reverence for Bonbibi, they say, might be the reason tiger populations have survived here while declining elsewhere. The myth, in its own way, protects both sides, but science can't erase belief. In the minds of the people, Bonbibi and Dokin Rai remain as real as the tides. In small huts near the forest edge, honey collectors tell their stories. One man remembers waking in the middle of the night to the sound of something heavy brushing against his wall. He stayed still until dawn and found tiger tracks in the sand outside his door. Another recalls seeing eyes shining from the trees as he crossed a creek alone. He whispered Bonbibi's name until he reached his boat, then pushed off without looking back. Every story ends the same way, with gratitude for survival, not victory. During the monsoon, the forest becomes almost unreachable. The air turns thick, and the rain falls for days. Lightning flashes over the horizon, and thunder rolls through the trees like a warning. This is when locals say Dokin Rai's power grows strongest. They stay home, tend to their families, and wait for the storm to pass. The forest belongs to the spirits until the water recedes. By daybreak, when the tides are low, the mangroves gleam silver in the new light. The shrines to Bonbibi stand like sentinels among the roots, small yet resilient. The villagers gather there again before entering the forest, carrying their nets, baskets, and smoke boxes. The rituals begin once more. The words spoken are the same ones their ancestors said centuries ago. Prayers for protection, promises to take only what the forest allows. Far inside the Sundarbans, where no path remains clear for long, the boundaries blur between land and water, between man and tiger, between belief and survival. The people here know that crossing those boundaries without respect can mean disappearance. That is why, even now, no one forgets to whisper Bonbibi's name before stepping into the mangrove's shadow. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. You drive down a narrow, winding country lane in Germany's North Rhine-Westphalia region. Soon the pavement ends and the forest closes in, the trees tall and thick, their boughs darkening the air even in daylight. This is the Hürtgen Forest, ground-soaked in history, scarred by war, and still carrying the weight of conflict long past. We enter this chapter by walking through its war-echoed ruins, and then cross the invisible line where trenches, shell holes, and unexploded ordnance shift from history into present danger. Deep in the forest lies the first part of the story, war echoes and ruins. During the autumn and winter of 1944, Allied forces advanced into Hürtgen as part of their push into Germany. They entered dense fir woods, steep ridges, deep ravines, minefields, pillboxes, and concrete bunkers. The forest was difficult terrain, trees so tight that tanks could barely maneuver, fog and cold that sapped strength, and a defence system carefully prepared by German troops. The fighting lasted 88 days from September through early December, making it the longest battle on German soil in World War II for the US Army. Tens of thousands of American casualties and many German losses were recorded. The US Army counted more than 33,000 casualties in that forest campaign. The advance often measured in yards, not miles. The wounded scattered through wood and valley. Dead soldiers lay uncounted for days. Nearly every ridge, every path, every shell crater remains a mark of that ordeal. Walking now through Hürtgen, you see what remains. Shattered bunker walls, trenches filled with rainwater, forest tracks that once were supply roads, and memorials tucked among the trees. Mines still kill today. In the decades after the war, local residents and visitors have been killed or injured by unexploded ordnance hidden in roots, mounds, or forest debris. For many, the forest is not only a place of memory, it is a place still dangerous. Signs warn of mines, museums show the destroyed tracked vehicles. The forest floor hides more than leaves and twigs, it hides history. Then comes the borderline. There are places where the forest feels normal again, picnic spots, hiking trails, quiet valleys where birds call and sunlight slants. But as dusk approaches, or as you move into deeper ridges, the atmosphere shifts. The line between village and woodland, between safety and risk, grows thin. One ridge road leads past Schmidt and Kommerscheid, one of the key sectors of the 1944 battle. The slope drops toward the river valley, the ground still scarred with tank tracks and German positions. On map and on ground, the boundary of that battle zone remains distinct. Residents advise, stay on marked trails, don't wander after dark, the forest is old and uneasy, because beneath the quiet lie wreckage, minefields, unexploded bombs. A stumble can carry consequence. A wrong turn might lead into a collapsed bunker roof or hidden blast site. The forest holds danger. At twilight, the trees shut out the fading light. The echoes of artillery fade, but the silence deepens. You might pass a silent clearing that once held an American mortar pit. You turn a corner and find a German observation post carved into rock. The names of units are still etched faintly on bunk walls. The noise you heard from the car road disappears. Only the wind in fir needles, the soft drip of rain through leaves, the sense of time layered. The forest takes on a presence not supernatural, but heavy with what has happened. People speak of hearing distant creaks and thumps that could be branches or could be something called back by the battle. Visitors sometimes feel they should not linger, because the borderline in Hürtgen is not just legal or signed, it is psychological. You walk into woods that once held war, and the forest still remembers. When you cross into deeper trails, the soil underfoot changes, the vegetation becomes thicker, the forest keeps closer. The warning signs about mines are not decoration. The ground may buckle, a root might conceal a hole. Even by day, the ridge paths are slippery, leaf-covered, seldom used. At dusk, they become obscure. Locals sometimes say, "We know the forest here, but we do not trust the night." And so the forest remains a ghost of war, a memory zone and a live hazard. For hikers and history seekers, the key is respect. Stick to the marked paths. Do not enter areas marked mine danger. On stairway approaches in steep ridges, the ground sags. Forestry crews often close certain tracks after heavy rain because tunnels left by collapsed bunkers open. The forest continues to shift. Nature reclaims, but the scars remain. By day it is beautiful and quiet. By night or in bad weather it becomes unpredictable. It is that tension that holds the chapter here. The tangible ruins of 1944, the mental borderline of risk, and the forest's layered memory. We walk past one memorial uphill of the village of Hürtgen, mount the stone steps of a German fortification built into the hillside. There you stop. The bench looks outward over the valley. The war is over, yet beneath the wind you imagine mortar wine, the echo of tank engines, the cries of wounded. The trees conceal bunkers, the moss hides shell holes. You feel the forest's memory rest on you. The path back takes you through scrub and pine needles, and you're glad to leave the ridges behind. The map says exit here. The forest allows you the choice. Night may come. If the forest trail remains open, you might notice a rustle beyond what you expect. It is not a ghost. It is a fir branch or maybe a deer, but the ground is wounded land. The forest's history and hazards combine. For those who walk here, the message is clear. Honor the history and heed the terrain. The voiceover becomes the forest whisper. Stop, listen, remember, and walk back before the border into danger closes again. Houska Castle and Bohemian Woodland, Czech Republic. Deep in the Bohemian forest north of Prague lies Houska Castle, a place of stone, legend, and hidden hollows. The trees crowd close. The air is still, and a narrow track winds toward a medieval fortress that seems less designed for defense than for containment. Long ago, a chasm was discovered beneath the ground, so deep no one could see the bottom. Locals came to believe this was a portal, a gateway to the underworld. The castle, built above it, stood to seal what lay beneath. The origins of Houska date to the late 13th century, under the reign of Ottokar II of Bohemia. The stone walls were erected on a remote rock outcrop, with no water source, no major trade route, and no obvious external threat. Scholars have asked, why here? One answer lies in the chasm. The pit lies in the forest floor beneath the chapel's crypt. It was said ancient creatures crawled out at night, and screams echoed from the abyss when the earth shifted. The castle builders, the tale says, aimed to keep those things underground. The chapel was built directly above, its interior frescoes showing demons, dragons, and centaurs, a strange iconography for a holy space. The logic of architecture suggested containment rather than defense. Folklore deepens the architecture's meaning. One tale tells of prisoners offered pardon if they agreed to be lowered by rope into the pit and report what they saw. According to the story, the first man dropped down and began screaming minutes later. His hair turned white, his face aged decades, he died soon after. Another version says that winged monsters and humanoid beasts emerged, wounded but visible in torchlight, then vanished again. Visitors today claim to hear distant rumble, footsteps echoing under the floor, doors opening despite no one inside. Some talk of a faceless monk who appears on the walls at twilight, or a phantom hound patrolling the courtyard. The castle's remote woodland setting matters. Trees surround the stone complex on all sides. Moss covers rock ledges. The silence grows thick after the last visitor leaves. Paths leading to the old fort are narrow, uneven, and by dusk the wood swallows light so quickly you lose your sense of direction. At the edge of the clearing, the forest closes in. The undergrowth quiets, and the air seems heavy. Here the map ends and the myth begins. When you stand in the courtyard and look at the chapel, aware of the pit below, you feel the ground slow. The rules of the human world, clock time, leaf rustle, bird song, step back. The chapel towers lean inward. The motifs on frescoes show archangels fighting serpents, centaurs with human faces displayed in carved stone. Odd symbols for a Christian building. Some historians point this to an earlier pagan layer, suggesting the rock beneath was regarded as sacred or taboo. The tunnel idea may have grown later, but the idea of a breach between worlds carries weight. Today, tourists walk the ramparts by day, group voices echo, cameras flash. But guides warn, at dusk the forest shifts. The pit, though sealed, is said to release a moan, a cold breeze, or vanish into darkness with its ancient cargo. Walking the woodland trail, you realise something else. The castle was not built to hold out, it was built to hold in. It faces inward toward the chasm, not out toward a highway or invader. There are few outside fortifications and no large defensive towers pointing to distant threats. Instead, the fortress walls lean over the earth itself. Some archaeologists say the builders chose that spot because they needed to guard the hole in the ground, not the land beyond. For many visitors, the castle is less a palace than a lid. Recent hunters of history and ghost tourists have trod these stones. People report an odd fatigue, a sense of being watched, or an unhinging of time inside the chapel basement. One photographer says his clock stopped the minute he entered the crypt. Another says his footsteps echoed like laughter. Others find it hard to explain why a site of so little historical strategic value became so rich in legend. But the value is in tone, not tactic. The forest itself contributes to the atmosphere. Evening comes swiftly under the tall pines, birdsong slows, shadows deepen, and the path back to the village feels longer than the walk in. Locals seldom walk the trail alone at dusk. They treat the castle as part of the woodland's secret hold, safe until a line is crossed. Guides evoke the legend gently, explaining that visitors are free during daylight, but that there's a reason the castle sits there in that rock, in that wood, in that valley, a reason tied to fear, containment, and the unknown. Even now, the layered architecture of Houska stands. The rain-collecting cistern, the lack of major water source, the remote location, the inward-facing ramparts. These become the physical record of a purpose other than comfortable habitation. The myth of the pit below gives the stone its weight and the wood its hush. The bridge between folklore and what the terrain allows is narrow, 1 foot in legend, 1 in geology. But the forest holds both. At dusk the chapel windows darken, the wood around grows still, and the path home is lit by lanterns. Many leave while there is daylight. Some linger until the final group exits. They look back. They see the castle and they feel the forest closing behind. The walls, the pit, the forest meet there in cold rock and whispered story. And when the visitor finally walks away, the wind in the trees seems to say, some doors were made not to open but to guard what lies beneath. Bennington Triangle, Glastonbury Mountain, Vermont, USA. The air in southern Vermont feels different when you start to climb toward Glastonbury Mountain. The forest thickens fast, the roads narrow, and the towns fade behind you until only the sound of the wind remains. The hills here are old, quiet, and empty in a way that feels intentional, as if they prefer to be left alone. This part of the Green Mountains has long been marked on maps as ordinary wilderness, but to those who live nearby, it holds a darker name. They call it the Bennington Triangle. The name itself was first used decades after the events that gave it power, but the unease began much earlier. In the 1800s, Glastonbury was a logging town filled with mills, tracks and cabins that stood along the mountain slopes. But by the turn of the century, the trees were gone, the mills silent, and the people gone with them. The mountain reclaimed its own, leaving behind cellar holes, broken wagons and fading trails that vanished into the woods. By the mid-1900s, the region had already turned into a ghost landscape. Empty villages, forgotten logging roads, and dense, disorienting forest. It was in this setting that a series of disappearances began to unfold one after another over just a few years. The first came in November 1945. A man named Middy Rivers, a 74-year-old hunting guide who knew the area better than anyone, was leading a small group through the foothills of Glastonbury. He walked ahead of them on the trail, turned a bend and was never seen again. Search parties scoured the forest for days. Hundreds of volunteers and state police officers covered every ravine and ridge, but they found nothing except a single spent rifle cartridge near a stream. The old hunter had vanished as if the forest had swallowed him whole. A year later, in December 1946, it happened again. Paula Jean Weldon, an 18-year-old student from Bennington College, set out for a hike on the long trail that winds through Glastonbury Mountain. She was seen walking along the road by several people wearing a red coat against the winter chill. One witness saw her near the trail entrance just before sunset. After that, she disappeared. For days, hundreds of searchers combed the area. Planes flew overhead, police dogs traced faint scents that led nowhere, and locals camped in the snow hoping to find any sign of her. But no trace ever surfaced. Not a coat, not a footprint, not a body. After Paula's case, the region began to gain a strange reputation. People spoke of magnetic fields that confused compasses, of strange lights in the forest, and of a feeling that time moved differently in those woods. Hunters avoided the mountain altogether, yet the vanishings didn't stop. In December 1949, a veteran named James Tedford boarded a bus from St Albans bound for Bennington. Dozens of passengers remembered seeing him during the trip, sitting quietly near the back, reading a small pamphlet. When the bus reached Bennington, Tedford's seat was empty. His luggage was still in the rack above him, and his ticket lay on the seat. No one saw him leave. He had vanished mid-route in a moving bus. Less than a year later, in October 1950, an 8-year-old boy named Paul Jepson disappeared while his mother tended animals near the town dump just east of Glastonbury. She turned away for a few minutes. When she looked back, the boy was gone. Searchers found no trace except for a faint trail of footprints leading toward the mountain, and then stopping. Just 16 days later, another local 53-year-old Frida Langer fell into a stream while hiking with her cousin in the same region. She told him she'd go back to camp to change clothes and rejoin the group. She never returned. Unlike the others, her body was eventually found months later in an area that had already been searched multiple times. No cause of death could be determined. 5 disappearances in 5 years, all within roughly the same area, none with clear answers. Even for those who refused to believe in curses or strange forces, the pattern was unsettling. Theories spread quickly: bears, hidden sinkholes, human predators, but none fit perfectly. The forest itself became the suspect. People began to speak of Glastonbury Mountain as a place that didn't want visitors, a mountain that could erase people without a sound. Old logging maps show how confusing the terrain can be. The trails twist and split, some marked only by stone piles that crumble with time. The soil is soft, and heavy rains carve out sudden gullies. The canopy overhead blocks the sun, and when the fog comes down, visibility drops to a few feet. Even seasoned hikers can lose their bearings within minutes. Rescue teams often reported hearing faint calls or seeing flashes of red fabric that vanished before they could be reached. Many came back saying the woods distorted sound, that voices echoed from the wrong direction, or footsteps seemed to come from the trees themselves. The region's history only deepens the strangeness. Before settlers arrived, the Abenaki people avoided Glastonbury, calling it a cursed place where the 4 winds met in conflict. They said the mountain moved between worlds, a space where spirits wandered freely. Later, when mills and logging camps rose there, workers spoke of eerie noises at night, echoes of picks on stone or whispers from the ravines. Even after the industry died, hunters told of hearing faint drums deep in the woods, as if the mountain remembered what came before. Today, Glastonbury is largely uninhabited. The last permanent residents left more than 70 years ago. The forest has erased the roads, and the ruins of the old village lie buried under roots and moss. Hikers who venture up the slopes often report a strange stillness, as if the forest muffles all sound. Compasses spin without reason near certain clearings, radios lose signal. The mountain seems to fold in on itself, hiding what it doesn't want found. Some hikers have described moments where the light feels wrong, an odd dimming of the air even at noon. One man said it felt as if the forest paused to watch him, then let him go only when he turned back down the trail. The mystery of the Bennington Triangle has never been solved, and no physical evidence has ever linked the disappearances. The cases remain open, filed under missing persons, closed by time but not by reason. The wilderness remains what it always was, vast, indifferent, and quiet. On a map, Glastonbury looks like any other mountain, surrounded by green forest and narrow streams. But when you stand beneath its trees, with the wind moving through the branches and the ground soft underfoot, it feels different. The silence here has a texture, as if it remembers. The forest keeps what it takes, and the mountain keeps its own counsel. Elfin Forest, Quest Haven Harmony Grove, California, USA. The road dips and curves through the scrub hills of northern San Diego County, and soon the pavement disappears into a narrow, dark ribbon of pavement that winds past oak groves and wild chaparral. You pull into the dust-marked clearing for Elfin Forest and its neighbour, Harmony Grove, places where earth and sky meet in quiet, and where history has woven its own odd patterns. The next 40 minutes take you through whispering legends, psychic retreats, and deep woods that locals treat differently after dark. Folklore here is thick. Harmony Grove was founded in 1896 by spiritualist pioneers who saw the land as a fitting home for communal belief in contact with the beyond. Among the trees and hills, they set up what they called a spiritualist camp. In that setting grew the notion that the forest had hidden energy, that unseen presences walked between the oaks. In Elfin Forest, rumours swirl of gypsy camps, curses laid long ago, a resident white witch drifting through the woods. Some speak of an old house with no doors or windows, mask-like faces carved in bark, whispering wind that echoes their names. These tales persist because the terrain allows them, trees so tall and close that light fades hours earlier than you expect, roads so curved and steep that headlights swing across trunks instead of highway signs. Support for the legends is plentiful. One widely told story says that a woman in white wandered Quest Haven Road on a cold October night, signed by lights crashing into her car and the brakes failing before she steered off the road into a tree. A former fire chief for Elfin Forest is quoted as saying there were 16 to 20 wrecks a year on that stretch, many blamed on something unseen. Others remark that a haunted downgrade appears in the rearview mirror as a shadow that isn't theirs. In the forest, hikers say their radios fade. Their watchers feel more than a presence. They feel attention. One local spiritualist reported seeing children's voices in the pitch of wind through leaves and faces at the edge of torchlight that weren't there when he turned back. Then there are the mental hospital ruins myth. Many websites claim that Quest Haven Retreat was once a lunatic asylum where terrible experiments took place. In reality, it was founded as a spiritual retreat property by Flower and Lawrence Newhouse around the 1940s and never admitted patients as a hospital. But the myth persisted. Abandoned buildings, sealed gates, no trespassing warnings fed it. Investigators and local reporters found no records of large-scale institutional death or violence, but the myth had already grown strong. Still, people come for the story, and the story bends the experience. In the quiet wood, if you already expect a witch, everything becomes symbolic. On the biology side, there are plausible explanations. The hills around Elfin Forest harbour steep slopes, narrow roads, poor cell phone reception and sharp drop-offs. At dusk, the scrub chaparral and oak woodland trap the light. Visibility falls fast. Drivers unfamiliar with the grade may misjudge speed. Wildlife may jump in front of headlights. If your radio fades and your GPS pings faintly, you feel more vulnerable. If you're alone on the road after dark, the mind fills the empty corners. The forest isn't haunted, but it is disorienting. Combine folkloric expectation with the terrain and conditions like wind, darkness and curve, and you have a perfect mix for stories. The local vehicle drivers know the rule: don't rush late at night through the forest roads. Tour guides of Escondido mention teenagers driving up the valley for thrills. Locals warn them off. Some parents say their kids dared each other to drive Questhaven Road, saw the lights, got spooked and left the car running for hours. Others say they turned back long before the bend that leads down into the narrow gully where the trees lean in. On foot, the trail is simple by day, with chaparral ridges, sage scrub, and signs of settlement from the 1800s. But by night you lose the horizon. The undergrowth merges into shadow. Few of the historic settlers planned for mysteries. The area's name came partly from the plant community: dwarf oak, scrub wildflower, picturesque hills. Yet the name Elfin Forest took on new meaning when ghost stories took root. The spiritualist camp at Harmony Grove, the tiny psychic village dozens of years later, tied the land to other realms in public imagination. Over time, the railroads and orchards gave way to rural homes and narrow country roads. The past didn't disappear, it just changed shape. Joggers and hikers now pass the same ridges where spiritual seances once occurred. Some say the same energy remains. Others say it's just memory chasing the quiet. By day, the place is calm. A trailhead, a creek, chaparral, distant hills, birds call, wind drifts. But the moment you stay past sunset, you notice a change. The trees lean closer, the sound of traffic fades, the path behind you seems narrower. You feel you walked in both to nature and to story. Locals don't force the legend, they carry it. When you ask about the White Lady, or the small house with no windows, you're told, it's just old story, but we don't run cars late there. The warning speaks louder than the myth. For those who hike, the same caution applies. If you reach a wooden gate marked private property at the end of Questhaven Road, you're standing at the boundary, not just of land, but of narrative. The forest beyond is still forest. The stories beyond are still stories. Researchers found no large-scale psychic activity records or hospital archives supporting the most extreme claims. Flora and fauna surveys show rich biodiversity, ridges of oak and scrub, rare birds and reptiles. But the geological and biological reality doesn't kill the myths, it feeds them. Some experts say that to experience the strange part of Elfin Forest, you must step into the edge where the wood becomes thinner, where the road disappears, where the lights dim. That edge is where folklore meets biology. A ghost might not walk the lane, but the headlight of a car might bounce across bark and resemble a face. A crash might be avoided with caution, but it still becomes part of the local warning. Teenagers leave skip records. Don't drive that hill at midnight, or we saw the lady in white at the crest. In this way, the legend acts as a cultural guardrail. When you leave the Ridge Road and circle back through Rancho Santa Fe or Escondido, the night air feels open again. The story remains behind, but the seed of it has taken root. Curious travellers find themselves in shadows, part nature walk, part ghost tour. Locals still hold their truth quietly. Some things happened, some things could be explained, and some things they choose not to explore at night. The forest holds them, so you drive away from Elfin Forest and Harmony Grove just after dusk. The trees thin, the houses rise, the lights return. You glance at the rearview mirror, and for a moment you expect the white dress, the flick of a lantern, the whisper of wind that isn't wind. But you tell yourself it was the play of headlights and shadow, the trick of the late hour and quiet hills. The road opens up again, and you carry the story with you, not as proof, not as belief, but as part of the forest you visited and the stories it keeps. Wistman's Wood, Dartmoor, England. On the high granite moors of Devon, where the wind never seems to rest, there lies a small patch of forest that feels older than the rest of the land. It's called Wistman's Wood, a name that sounds like something whispered rather than written. From a distance, it looks like nothing more than a cluster of gnarled oak trees scattered among boulders. But when you step closer, the ground seems to pull you in. Every stone is wrapped in moss. Every branch twists into strange shapes, and the silence between the wind gusts feels thick, as if the forest is holding its breath. Wistman's Wood sits in the heart of Dartmoor, a place already known for its strange weather and wild legends. But even among these fog-covered hills, the wood stands apart. It's one of the highest oak woods in England, surviving where few other trees can. Botanists describe it as a relic of ancient woodland, a remnant of the forest that once covered Britain thousands of years ago. The oaks here are small and bent, growing out of moss-covered granite in tangled shapes. Some are barely taller than a person but look as if they've been alive since the world was young. The ground beneath them is uneven, a maze of slippery boulders and deep green carpets of moss that seem to glow faintly in the low light. The air feels different inside Wistman's Wood. The temperature drops, the sounds dull, and the light turns a muted green. It's easy to lose your sense of time there. Hikers say the forest feels much larger than it is, less than 10 acres, yet it seems endless when you're in it. Every turn looks the same, and every path leads deeper into shadow. The wood has an odd stillness that even the wind avoids. On most days you can hear this wind roaring across the open moor, but once you step among the oaks the sound fades, replaced by quiet, breathing earth. Local legends say the forest was once the meeting place of the wished hounds, ghostly hunting dogs that roam Dartmoor under the command of the devil himself. The word wished in Old Devon dialect means eerie or haunted. According to the tales, the hounds run through the wood at night, black and huge, with eyes like fire and jaws that drip foam. Travellers caught on the moor after sunset were said to hear their howls before being chased across the open land. In some stories, the hounds guard the entrance to the underworld, hidden beneath the roots of Wistman's twisted oaks. In others, they are omens of death, appearing before storms or tragedy. People who live near Dartmoor have told these stories for centuries. Even now, few locals are comfortable walking into Wistman's Wood after dark. Farmers say their animals avoid it. Dogs refuse to go near its edges. Some hikers claim to have heard panting and footsteps behind them, though no one was there. Others report seeing strange lights moving through the trees, soft and flickering like lanterns carried by invisible hands. A few have found claw marks on stones, or heard growls carried on the wind that vanish when they stop to listen. Archaeologists point out that the area around Wistman's Wood is full of ancient remains. Bronze Age cairns and stone circles lie scattered across the surrounding moor, suggesting that people have seen something sacred or dangerous in this land for thousands of years. Old records mention the wood as a site of druid worship, though there's little evidence beyond tradition. Still, it fits the atmosphere. The oaks look like they've been shaped by ritual rather than nature. Knotted together, growing sideways, heavy with a hanging lichen that drips from their branches like cobwebs. Even in daylight, it feels like a place meant to be seen, not entered. For those who explore Dartmoor, maps always show Wistman's Wood as a small blot near the West Dart River, but it's not an easy place to find. You can see it from far away, an island of green among the brown moor, but the path to it winds through bogs and uneven ground. Many hikers lose the trail in fog. The weather changes without warning here. One moment the sun might shine on the stones, and the next you're surrounded by mist so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead. That's when people say the forest comes alive. The map of Dartmoor tells more than the land, it tells its temperament. Wistman's Wood sits in a basin of old granite tors near Crochen Tor, once believed to be the seat of the ancient Dartmoor Parliament. From above, the wood seems trapped between these stony outcrops, as if the hills themselves are keeping it in place. The West Dart River flows close by, its banks slippery and steep, and at night the sound of rushing water mixes with the distant cry of foxes and sheep. It's easy to imagine how travellers in earlier centuries could have mistaken those noises for the wished hounds. Scientists explain the strange shapes of the trees by the altitude and the wind. The oaks grow slowly here, stunted by thin soil and harsh weather, their trunks bending over time under the weight of moss and wind. The atmosphere traps moisture, making the forest damp all year round. The mosses and lichens that cover the stones thrive in this humidity, turning everything into shades of green and gold. Biologists call Wistman's Wood an example of temperate rainforest ecology, one of the rarest habitats in Europe. It's a living time capsule of what Britain's landscape looked like long before farms and towns spread across it. Yet even with scientific explanations, the feeling of the place remains the same. People who visit often describe a sensation of being watched, or of walking through a dream. Cameras sometimes fail, batteries drain faster than expected, and compasses spin unpredictably. The ground underfoot is soft, but the stones are slick, and the light between branches seems to bend. Even the air smells different, earthy, metallic, and sweet all at once. Many who've walked there in daylight admit they would never do so at night. When darkness falls on Dartmoor, the wood disappears into shadow, and the path becomes invisible. The stories of the wished hounds echo across the hills, carried by the wind that returns once you leave the trees. Locals say that if you ever hear the hounds in the distance, you must lie flat on the ground until they pass, because to look upon them is to invite death. Some claim they've seen shapes moving just beyond the fog line, too big for dogs, too fast for people, and too silent for animals. Despite, or maybe because of its reputation, Wistman's Wood draws thousands of visitors every year. Some come for its beauty, others for its mystery. They take photographs, touch the old oak bark, and listen for the wind between the branches. But those who linger too long notice how quickly the forest seems to change. The air thickens, the moss darkens, and the sound of their own breathing grows louder. The path out looks different from the path in, and even when they reach the open moor again, they keep glancing back, half expecting to see something standing among the trees, watching them leave. Up on the ridge, the fog rolls back, the wind howls again, and Wistman's Wood disappears beneath it, as it has for centuries, hiding its roots and its stories under the shifting skies of Dartmoor. Every forest in these stories carries something deeper than fear. Some guard history, others echo loss, and a few remind us how little control we have over nature's hidden corners. Whether the danger is real or imagined, one truth remains. When the light fades and the forest grows quiet, there are still places on Earth where we simply don't belong.